Thank you.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you all for attending this evening. Everyone is present except for Jeff, I think. Is that right? And Enrique. With that, we'll move on to open forum. We have a number of letters to read this evening, so I'm going to switch from the mask to the shield. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. We can do this. Okay, the letters are in no particular order. I'll start with the first one. This is from Amy Revac. There is no address. I am a mother of a student and athlete at Prior Lake High School. I'm very concerned about the posturing of the district and the school board. For the well-being of our children, let them resume school and let them in. Our kids need academic structure, our athletes need their sport, and kids need their clubs. They need this now more than ever. Continuing to deny them of these opportunities from a virus that has us with a 99.9% recovery rate is deplorable. School board members and the superintendent have the opportunity to give them what they desperately need. Denying them is committing emotional terrorism, and for this I hold you all accountable for the repercussions of the damage done to our kids. Stop putting our kids at risk academically and emotionally. Let them learn, let them see their friends, let them in their clubs, let them play their sport, let them have spectators, let them have their life back. Allow families to make decisions based on what is best for them. The next one is from Brian Cristallo from Prior Lake. I'd like to address the discrepancy between kids' safety and the value of hybrid learning. If the PL school board is concerned about our children's safety, there would be either in-person learning 5 days a week or distance learning, not this hybrid mess. For frame of my commentary, this is directly related to my experiences in an elementary-aged family only. Strain on families. For working parents, single parents, and dual households, what is being asked on the off days is not sustainable. Parents have jobs, other children, and we're asking for an attention span of K-5 to somehow log in at all the right times, manage links that don't work, Google Meets, being taught via worksheet, that they'll sit there and do work on task and well. It's not a reality. We're stressing our parents and children far beyond necessary. Being in school 2 days a week is a travesty to our children's education. The lack of consistency and whipsawed day to day is similar to having 5 consecutive Mondays in your jobs. It's counterproductive, sad, and confusing to them. Strain on teachers. They're doing their best to teach in person and distance, so hats off to them, but their workload isn't sustainable and we'll see burnout soon. They'll get 10 minutes to answer questions from the at-home kids on a day. That's it, see point 1 above. That means parents are filling the role of a teacher. I'm seeing emails from the teachers at night and on weekends because they're asked to teach double the workload and then some while trying to manage an in-person and virtual lesson plan. It's not fair to them. Safety. Please explain to me how my child is safer going to school 2 days a week, the other 3 being sent to any of hundreds of random centers, programs, activities, which mix children from all across the metro. Don't let me forget to remind you that I now get to pay for this. How is this safer than having the same 20 kids together 5 days a week in a controlled environment? And for those that don't send their kids to a formal program every day, I see 50-plus kids grouped together outside, out and about at public places, such as skate parks, stores, etc., literally just killing time and getting in trouble. That's an acceptable alternative. Our kids were allowed to play active contact sports since April, but somehow can't sit in a classroom and learn together. Show me the logic. Also, if this is truly a health concern, how is it that local private schools easily figured out how to implement 5 days a week in person and on time, following state guidelines, yet PL couldn't? As one of the supposedly most contagious viruses in our history, it seems odd that the virus can discern between types of school funding and only affect public schools, thereby requiring ridiculous restrictions. Doesn't make me wonder why the private schools are now seeing wait lists to get in. I have submitted these thoughts and posed questions to the school board before and have received very canned answers that say, thank you for your questions. We'll continue to follow all the state and local guidelines in regards to blah, blah, blah. I'm still waiting for a serious response that has common sense and logic applied. You are hurting our children's ability to get an education because you are afraid of liability. Let me, as the parent who's responsible for the child, determine risk. You know, one with a 99.99% survival rate. You've given the option for distance. If there are families who wish to avoid such risk, please continue to provide that option and stop penalizing the rest of our children. We have plenty of friends across the U.S. that have kids in public schools 5 days a week since the middle of August with no issues. Why can't Prior Lake find a way to be successful at this? Where is the leadership? If anything, the decisions made to not allow kids staying together in person 5 days a week is actually putting them in more danger, not keeping them safe. Get our kids back in person 5 days a week. It's the right decision, and it's time. The next one is from, I don't have a name on this one. Oh, Sandy Kelsch. As you continue to make decisions that will affect the entire student body, please ask yourself if what you are deciding is in the best interest of students. If that decision is not to keep kids in school, then I assure you that you're not considering the people most affected by your decisions. What is happening in the general population is not reflective of what is happening with students in school. It's not accurate to base our kids' learning environment on positive cases in the community, as they are not being affected the same. It is frustrating as a parent to watch the struggles of students of all ages. They are not learning in this environment. It is not sustainable to keep them in a non-learning environment. They need to be in school. Our students are not only missing out on social learning, but they're beginning to fall behind in curriculum. Also, keep in mind, these are not mandates, but rather guidelines. We can stand up for our students and help them to thrive rather than restricting them by following guidelines that are not in their best interest. You can see from public and private schools across the country and the world that this virus is far less harmful and far less of an issue to our students than the impact of keeping them out of school. I know from personal observation that it is also impacting their mental well-being. The mission statement for the Minnesota Department of Education reads, improve educational achievement by establishing clear standards, measuring performance, assisting educators, and increasing opportunities for lifelong learning. By forcing them to learn in a home environment and restricting their learning, we are certainly not following the mission statement of what the schools are here to do. Please don't fool yourself. We're not protecting our kids by keeping them safe. These hybrid and distance learning models are anything but safe. An outraged parent wishing our educators would make decisions on what is best for kids. Okay, the next one is from Tara Gunderson. Our kids need to be in school. The developmental and educational risks outweigh any physical risk from the virus for them. We moved to Prior Lake 8 years ago because of PLSAS' strong commitment to the education. My kids' grades 7, 5, and 3rd are at a very delicate age where if they fall behind now, and even if it's for 1 year, they will struggle with school for the rest of their school years. Kids who struggle with school lose interest and stop trying. We need to use our resources and the known PLSAS reputation to make the right decisions in keeping our kids on track to become successful adults. Please keep them in school. If they fail, we fail. Let's see, the next one is from Diana Copeland. I'm writing to express my concerns about distance, hybrid learning, and lack of sports at Prior Lake High School, specifically the high school. Lack of sports at Prior Lake School, specifically the high school. The quality of education is lacking with either learning model, but that's another story. The lack of social interaction is heartbreaking. My child feels so isolated, even when in class. With the distances, small classes, and 2 people to a lunch table, there is zero opportunity to make friends or talk to anyone. It's a very lonely time in what should be a young person's highlight of their high school years. While I do agree the numbers of COVID are getting higher, the majority of people are also getting over it fairly easily. It makes no sense for young people to be locked away at home. This virus isn't going away, nor is the influenza virus. The vaccine isn't going to be the end-all, be-all solution. We can't continue this forever. I'm in support of opening up the schools so the kids can have actual better quality interaction with their teachers, more socialization among the students, and an opportunity to play sports. Okay, the next one is from Christy Masser. I want to thank you for your hard work and effort to keep our students in as normal of a learning, activities, athletics environment as possible. I know it is currently a tireless, never-ending job. I cannot tell you how worrisome the current decision to move to distance learning for grades 6-12 is for our students and parents, but mostly for our athletes. Our hockey players and athletes in general are experiencing higher than normal anxiety right now around the question of their season, if their season will happen, and or be canceled due to the switch from hybrid to distance learning. My hope is that I can share with my 2 high school hockey players, as well as their teammates, that you, our school board, Dr. Stallo and Russ Reeds, are going to support them playing, even in the absence of in-person instruction. Can you shed any light on the possibility of maintaining our activities and athletics during distance learning? I was very happy to see that the consideration of parent-student concern over the above topic by the Anoka Hennepin District and their decision last week to move forward with extracurricular activities. As a parent, I am very concerned that taking yet another thing away from our students will reinforce an already heightened lack of structure and not take into account their needs from a psychosocial perspective. As I'm sure you're aware, the suicide, drug, alcohol abuse, and overdose numbers are on the rise, not only in Minnesota, but nationally, due to COVID circumstances and the anxiety, depression that has been created. When discussing this letter with my 2 hockey players, they each separately shared, if school closes down sports, kids will make increasingly bad choices, including drugs and alcohol, due to the lack of incentive to stay clean for your sport and teammates. In addition, they mentioned that students will once again be hanging out with friends in non-COVID safe situations. This is not something we as adults we don't know already, but I found it enlightening to hear it straight from the mouths of those individuals directly affected by the school board's decision. Athletics and activities offer structure and a safe place for students who aren't always comfortable saying no to peer pressure. Hockey has been playing safely since June with COVID-safe procedures in place for athletes and spectators. My personal opinion is distance learning shouldn't impact whether sports can continue to take place. My hope is our school board, Dr. Stallo and Russ Reitz, are truly listening to the concerns being voiced in our community, and those of you who are in the positions of power will stand up for the students you represent. Thank you again for all you do and for listening. I'm truly interested in your perspective and insights. We're going to be going over our 15 minutes. I'm assuming the board's okay with that. This one is from Stacy Buckingham, Prior Lake School Board. We moved to Prior Lake nearly 16 years ago because of the small community feel and the great schools. We have been so happy with all of this until the spring. We currently have 3 children in grades 7, 10, and 12, and our once great schools are now just a shallow of what once was. Our schools are now failing our children, and it feels as if no one in power even cares. Our 7th grader has struggled with school, but managed to get by with C's and B's, A's always in PE. He had F's for most of the spring, and now has D's and F's, except of course PE. Our 10th grader was a straight A student until the shutdown. She is struggling to maintain those same grades, especially in math, where learning from a screen just doesn't give the instant feedback most always necessary. Our senior is enrolled full-time at Normandale through PSEO, and the difference in methodology is remarkable. He has mostly synchronous classes with actual instruction every day, while his younger siblings are lucky to get instruction twice a week when they are in the buildings. Our children need to be in school full-time, and the virus data from all around the world supports this. In Sweden, where schools have never closed, with 1.8 million students, there has not been a single corona death. We know that kids are not in great danger from COVID-19, and in fact are in far more danger from mental health issues stemming from the shutdown. How can you be blind to this truth? In the spring, when our usually busy children were without their sports and their friends, the change in them was stunning. Our happy children were sullen, angry, depressed, and withdrawn. Their vitality disappeared. When I announced to our youngest that he could finally see his best friend, the joy on his face made me cry. When they could get back to hockey, lacrosse, and cheer, we started to get our children back. Humans are made to gather and do life together, and now we are back to where we started with almost no education happening, all for a virus with a 99% plus survival rate. For people who all claim to be in this for the children, it's the children who continue to get overlooked. The children have done everything you've asked them to do. They've worn the mask. They've social distanced. Where's their compensation? I've come to realize that battling for full-time in-person learning is seemingly a lost cause, and please fall on deaf ears, despite the fact that the CDC and American Pediatrics Association all claim that in-person learning is what is best for children. I do urge you to allow sports and activities to continue. You are already doing enough damage to our children by taking away school. Don't do any further damage by taking away what drives them to even try to do well in school. I can promise that parents won't stand for much more and will take these matters into their own hands and away from the schools if forced to do so. Private athletics is a billion-dollar industry, and I know the schools like having a slice of that. This one's from Julie Esch. I'm writing as a concerned parent of 2 elementary children in our school district to urge you to consider keeping the in-person learning in place. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the teachers and staff members are doing an incredible job on the in-person learning days. Young children learn best when surrounded by their peers and dedicated teachers in a classroom setting. Distance learning is a far cry from an ideal environment. At-home learning produces hardships like frustrated kids, removing peer socialization, a key component to critical thinking skills and relationship building. Curriculum that doesn't engage their brain is monotonous and lackluster. At school, the children have immediate access to the source and help they need and aren't sitting still in front of a screen. A larger portion of my urging rests in the mental health of our children. Suicide and drug overdoses are killing more young people than COVID-19, as the two pre-existing epidemics have been exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic, and affirmed by Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Director Robert Redfield. Suicide and drug overdose have claimed more young lives during the pandemic than COVID-19. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 34 in the United States, according to the CDC. Redfield emphasized the absence of schools for the increase in suicides, overdoses, and general mental health difficulties faced by young people during the pandemic. Our kids need stability, structure, support, and encouragement. What should begin at home is continued in the school environment. Families should have the choice to learn in person based on their level of comfort. The effects of sheltering our children at home far outweigh the risk of them not surviving COVID-19. We should be setting the example as their mentors. Living in fear of dying is a death sentence in and of itself. Let's allow them to do so in a way that's conscious of the rules already in place at our schools. This one's from Carly Magnuson. Dear school board members, as LABC representative for boys hockey, I'm writing in support of COVID-safe activities athletics during the distance learning and urge you to vote yes for winter activities athletics at the Monday, November 9th school board meeting. Dr. Stallo ended her Thursday, November 5th communication to the district with the following closing. Our priority continues to be the health and safety of our students, staff, and families as we work to provide the best educational experience we can to help our students grow academically and socially through the challenges of a public health crisis. As the district moves to distance learning, it is my belief that there is no safer, more equitable way for our students to continue growing socially than by participating in high school activities and athletics. I urge you to keep opt-in extracurricular activities a choice that students can continue to participate in safely. The fact is, the COVID safety protocols in schools are working to keep people healthy. The spread is happening in the community. If structured activities athletics are discontinued, I only foresee the community spread increasing, which unfortunately will keep students in a distance learning model longer. I believe the numbers around fall sports at Prior Lake High School support that the COVID safety protocols are working to keep our athletes healthy and the community spread down. Fall sports have around 650 athletes, of which only 4 athletes reported positive cases. These numbers in our athletic community back up the University of Wisconsin study findings that suggest participation in high school sports is not associated with increased risk of COVID-19. Research also supports that when students participate in activities, athletics, grades, attendance, physical, and mental health improve. Mental health of students continues to be a huge concern during this pandemic. I listened to the governor's call with MSBA and MASA members Deborah Pauley, MSBA board president, and Jordan school board chair, mentioned that there is currently a middle school with more suicide attempt hospitalizations than COVID hospitalizations. Sports and activities may be one way that we can positively impact the mental health of high school students. The Great Barrington Declaration indicates that the best thing for mental health of teenagers and those at risk is to resume normal activities. Another discussion point during the phone call between the governor and the MSBA and MASA was that when students aren't in school, it magnifies the difference between the haves and the have-nots. If high school sports are shut down, those that can will find other ways to compete. With regards to hockey, there is already a bridge season for hockey, and 42 teams across the state are participating in it. Parents are fully responsible for the fees associated with the season. There is no fundraising option, no assistance to help those that cannot afford the fees, no transportation, etc. The most equitable opportunity to participate in sports is within high school athletics. There are many, many more reasons we could discuss that support the continuation of opt-in activities within the high school framework during distance learning. I believe safety, social growth, equitable opportunity, mental health, and the fact that sports do not increase the spread of COVID are the most relative. Please help keep our student athletes healthy and safe during this pandemic by continuing high school athletics. Dear Superintendent and board members, this is from Aiden Emerson. My name is Aiden Emerson, and I am a senior co-captain of the Prior Lake Boys High School hockey team. I've been playing hockey since first grade and have spent nearly every year of my life since then working to be the best player I could be. Having spent more than half my life focusing on the game I love, You can imagine the anxiety I've felt for the last 8 months, wondering if I will ever wear the C I worked so hard to achieve. I have skated with the boys on this team for 10 years and know that this is a special group. We came up short last year, but knew this coming season we had a real shot at getting to the state tournament. This is a very talented group who also have worked so hard to achieve that same goal. It is the reason many of us drag ourselves out of bed when we're tired. It's why we work hard in school. It's what keeps us physically and mentally energized throughout the winter. Since the school year ended abruptly last year, it has taken a toll on all high schoolers, particularly seniors. We missed our junior prom. We watched our senior friends have their graduation events torn away from them. We watched those senior athletes who played a spring sport sit on the sidelines in total sadness. I remember thinking to myself last May, please don't let this happen to us. Please let us have a senior year in school and playing our sports. We are now facing the nightmare we had hoped we would not be living in. It's been hard enough adjusting to hybrid learning and not seeing our friends in the halls for our senior year before we head our separate ways next fall. Now it's impossible we will never set foot in our high school again. It's been difficult on Friday nights knowing our students are not in the stands supporting our football team. It's been hard missing our senior homecoming festivities, knowing we will likely be missing our senior prom. All our rites of passage have been looking forward to all our rites of passage we have been looking forward to our entire lives have been ripped away, and we feel helpless. We want to be in school and understand that county numbers are a contributing factor to the decision to go distance learning. We will now be missing out on the socialization with our peers during the cold winter months. For those of us winter athletes, the only thing we have to look forward to right now is our sport. It is our main source of socialization and our outlet for physical and mental wellness. Many of us on the hockey team have been playing hockey safely for the past 6 months. Most recently, 7 of us on the team played the last 7 weeks in the high school elite league. We followed strict protocols. We entered the rink 30 minutes before games, fully dressed and masked until game time. Socially distanced in the rink between periods. We're not allowed to shower and undressed in our cars. We did things so that we could play. We follow these rules at RIS around the state all summer and fall, and the protocols have worked. There have been very few cases of COVID that could be traced to any interaction between the athletes. I personally do not know any hockey players who contracted COVID at the rink on the various teams I participated on during these months. Please know we can and will continue to follow safety guidelines set forth by the CDC and MDH in order to continue doing what we love. Please do not take away this one last piece of happiness away from us. We need this. I feel very strongly that taking away the winter sports season for our athletes is going to have a devastating effect on the physical and emotional well-being of our student athletes. As athletes, we make the choice every day to risk injury on the ice, basketball court, and football field. We know there are always risks to our health. We play because it gives us a sense of purpose and know that we are all working towards something tougher together. We and our parents are comfortable with the risks, and we want to be able to continue to make those decisions. The ramifications of a sports shutdown will be far greater than the positives that will come from letting us play. I worry about those of us who will and already are experiencing anxiety and depression from the uncertainties laid out before us. Please do not take away our season. We are counting on you. Thank you for listening. Okay, the next one is from Sarah Okonski. Dear Dr. Stallo and Prior Lake Savage Area School Board members, thank you for listening to the concerns of community members. I'm the mother of a 2020 Prior Lake High School graduate and an 8th grader at Twin Oaks Middle School. I will be as brief as possible. I commend our teachers and deeply appreciate all that they are doing to teach and nurture our children. So many of our teachers and staff go above and beyond on a daily basis. I am incredibly grateful. Sadly, with all of their effort, their students are suffering. I am most concerned about the mental health of the children in our district. The isolation and lack of social interaction has a significant negative impact on too many of our kids. We have come to a point where the COVID prevention strategies are hurting our kids more than they are helping them. Numerous studies and reports show that most young people are not at risk for contracting, spreading, or experiencing significant symptoms from this virus. They are at risk for depression and suicide. We must consider the whole child when making decisions about their education. With all the careful precautions implemented in our schools, we should be able to maintain at least the hybrid model. Scott County may be 37 positive tests per 10,000 residents, but according to the district dashboard, our district is only at 29 positive tests per 10,000 staff and students in the past 7 days. Child care facilities remain open without significant outbreaks. Private schools remain in person without significant outbreaks. And yet our 6th to 12th graders are now being sent home with extracurricular and enrichment activities being canceled as well. For instance, at the middle schools, jazz band and honor band are being canceled during distance learning, just when the additions were starting. These are the types of activities that help kids feel connected and get excited about school. It is the club or sport for so many kids, and now it isn't happening at all. Last week, the governor discouraged teachers from providing instruction simultaneously to in-person and at-home students, but that is exactly what is keeping students engaged in learning. Please encourage our teachers to continue and increase synchronous instructional time with class participation and discussion. Engaging with their teachers and classmates provides a much richer and successful learning environment than independent learning for most students. Keeping a schedule and having accountability also supports their academic success and their mental health. Our children need in-person school and in-person activities. Please allow families to continue to choose their own level of risk. Thank you for your time and consideration. This is from Luke McMahon. Dear Dr. Stallo and Prior Lake Savage Area School Board members, this letter is in regards to the Prior Lake Savage School District's policies and practices in regards to Minnesota Safe Learning Plan and concerns with the application of the plan. The plan has demonstrated an ability to maintain safety for students and staff at the K-5 level. However, there is concern that despite this demonstration of safety, the district will deviate from in-person learning and make all students distance learners in the near future. There is a significant benefit to in-person learning that has been stated by Prior Lake Savage Area Schools and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the School Superintendents Association. The negative impacts of a lack on in-person learning educationally, socially, and emotionally have also been described by the AAP. Unfortunately, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has failed to provide the full educational experience to students by not providing full-time in-person learning when guidelines permitted it this September. Additionally, the district has shown no flexibility in comparison to other surrounding districts when applying state guidelines. I implore the district to consider the available evidence in the future when making these determinations. It is critical that a safe environment be provided, and Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has demonstrated the ability to do this in the 2 months of hybrid learning, especially at the K-5 level, where there have been isolated reports of cases, but no reported outbreaks by the district. Strict protocols are set up to prevent an outbreak. These strategies are working. Published data from the AAP examining child care transmission of COVID-19 exposure to child care providers was not associated with an elevated COVID-19 risk to providers. Multiple surrounding district elementary and private primary schools have been holding full in-person classes for K-5. These schools have not shown outbreaks as they are not listed in the Minnesota Department of Health facilities with cases and exposures. I'm disappointed that Prior Lake schools have deviated from other surrounding districts and seem to be more concerned with turning the dial down rather than having in-person classes for our children. It is understood that case rates are rising and is likely that cases will soon exceed 50 cases per 10,000 residents per 14 days in Scott County. However, it is imperative that the district realizes the safety measures that have been put in place and the safe education that is able to provide for students. I encourage the district to keep elementary students learning in person in a hybrid mode at the very least, for the benefit that has been clearly outlined. Thank you for your consideration. This is from Jennifer Emerson. My son, Aiden Emerson, is a senior and the co-captain of the Prior Lake High School hockey team. As you can imagine, the anxiety he's feeling over the upcoming season is overwhelming. He and his teammates have worked so hard year in, year out to achieve the goal of the state tournament, and it's a goal they were set to achieve this coming season. At this point, they just want to play. With 10 seniors likely on the team this year, they're looking to ensure that happens. I've been in touch with Russ Reitz throughout the last few months, educating him on the safety protocols being followed in the high school hockey community since May, and have provided him with documentation of the success these protocols have had in keeping COVID at bay. For almost 6 months, the majority of high school hockey players have been playing in summer-fall leagues. Rinks have strict protocols such as masking until helmets are on, elimination of showers, warming up outside, expanded locker room space and/or dressing outside, and expedited exit from the building after games. Additionally, some rinks have temperature checks and online COVID screenings, and most rinks have had limited fans who are masked and spread out throughout the arenas. These protocols have worked while allowing the athletes to continue to play the sport they love. My fear, if sports are not allowed this winter, is a certain increase in anxiety and depression in these students. They have already been denied so many social opportunities, and denying them the physical and competitive outlet they need during these winter months will be devastating to their mental health. If our goal is to minimize community spread, then structured monitored activities following CDC and MDH guidelines is the best way to achieve that. I submit that supervised athletic activities are going to minimize the spread in this age group. If these athletes are no longer playing their sport, they will now have no structured environments and will likely be looking for other ways to spend their time. Staying eligible for high school sports is the reason many kids strive to work hard in school and keep their behavior in check while not on the ice, field, or court. Taking the responsibilities associated with staying eligible, coupled with their frustrations with COVID limiting their social opportunities, I cannot stress to you enough the seriousness of taking competition away. They are teenagers, they are social. They will congregate in large groups, likely unmasked and not social distancing. I think we will see an increase in community spread if this happens. I am sure you will see the report from the CDC that the ramifications of taking kids out of school and athletics will have effects far more serious than the risks associated with COVID. I understand we are moving to distance learning due to staffing issues, and that is a necessary outcome. Now that student athletes will no longer be in the district buildings, hockey players do not play on school property. Staff are not at risk from student exposures. Parents and student athletes should continue to make the choice to participate in extracurricular activities as they feel comfortable. As my son indicated in his letter to the board, student athletes risk injury every time they participate in a game practice. They understand the risks and make the decision to play. I speak for the parents of the hockey team when I say we are comfortable with our kids playing. We've been doing it for months with little to no exposures traced to hockey. Let us decide for our kids what is best for them. Thank you for listening. This one's from Michelle Gilbertson. Dear Prior Lake Savage Area Administration and board members, I'm sending this email in regards to the recent email I received concerning the switch to full-time distance learning. I currently have two high school girls at the high school, a 9th grader and 11th grader, who are both taking AP classes and are preparing for college. They both enjoy school and are great learners. I do not support the full-time distance learning approach in education at any level or age, and I'm asking that the hybrid model be returned after the 2-week quarantine. The isolation and lack of support from teachers leads to frustration, failure, and lack of motivation. I saw this firsthand this past spring with my son, who graduated from Prior Lake High School, and then my 6th grader. During this coronavirus pandemic, the mental, social, emotional, and psychological health of children and teens has been ignored. There have been no deaths of children and teens between the ages of 5 and 19 in the state of Minnesota from the virus. The coronavirus is not a threat to them, and their education should be a top priority. These teens need to be motivated by teachers, peers, coaches, and others to develop academically and physically. We chose to put our 2 daughters in hybrid because we believe they learn best face-to-face and not in front of a computer screen. My first preference, and theirs, is full-time in person, but I realize this is not an option at this time, and I'm holding out hope that it will return to that soon. I'm also concerned about the winter sports and activities at the high school if it is switched to full-time distance. Will the winter sports season be canceled? My 11th grade daughter participates in Nordic skiing on the varsity level and loves it with a passion. She, along with others, would be devastated if the season was canceled. I ask that the winter sports season continue and the teens will be able to participate in their favorite sports and activities this winter. I am asking that the hybrid model be returned in 2 weeks, followed by full-time in-person learning. They need the face-to-face interaction, guidance, and instruction from the great teachers and coaches at the middle schools and at Prior Lake High School. That's all the letters that we received by noon today. So that concludes our open forum. If anyone else would like to send letters in, they need to send them by noon the day of our meeting. And with that, sorry. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So made.
By
Second.
Stacy, second by Jonathan. Any comments or questions? That's a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye.
Aye.
Jonathan? Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Oh, gosh. Just a second. Okay, next is our consent agenda. These are items that are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion, and there is no separate discussion of the items. Financials, check wire transfer disbursement summary, wire transfer, EFT, ACH banking activity, bank reconciliation statement, building bond investment reports, monthly wire detail, monthly health dental wire detail, monthly check detail, monthly ACH detail, Approval of school board minutes for October 12th and the study session on October 26th. In personnel, the candidates for employment that are listed, resignations, terminations, and non-renewals as listed, and the Prior Lake Savage Area organizational chart. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So made.
By Michael, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Any comments or questions? Oh, I guess there aren't any. Take that to roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Now we're on to resolution of gifts. I feel like this is my show here or something. We have donations given to us this evening from Katie Morass, a value of $250 for technology equipment for Hidden Oaks. Charities and foundations, $14.55 for student resources at Hidden Oaks. Jim Groover, gift certificate of $500 for Bridges students in memory of Sue Ann Groover. PAA choir boosters, $1,000 for mask materials. The Regal family, countless hours for masks for 200 singers with internal structures to hold fabric off the face for easier singing. Mr. Johnson, $96 payroll pledge for enhanced programming at Westwood. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Se-
Is that Mary?
Mary, yeah, second.
Okay, any comments or questions? Roll call, Michael?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
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 Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to Laker Pride Special Recognition Showcase. That is going to be American Education Week. And I will read that proclamation. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they'll need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality, and whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future, and whereas education employees to be the custodians or teachers, be they custodians or teachers, administrators or clerical staff, bus drivers or media specialists, child nutrition staff or support staff, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas our district, the community hub, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise, now therefore, the Prior Lake Savage Area School Board of Education does hereby proclaim November 16th to the 20th, 2020, as the 99th annual observance of American Education Week. Okay, we'll move on now to personnel items. Jim?
Board members, board chair, Dr. Stallo. I have a few personnel items to present from the HR office tonight. The first one is for additional staffing for support staff. One of those positions is a new position, a East African cultural liaison, to complement some of our other liaisons that we have in the district. This is paid for out of a grant, an achievement and integration grant from MDE. The other two are activities, sports, coaches paid for by boosters. One is the assistant hockey coach, and the other is an assistant Nordic ski coach.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the staffing requests?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Michael. Any comments or questions?
This is Melissa.
Yes,
I have a
Melissa?
comment. The position of East African Cultural Liaison, can we define why we would want this when all children in America are taught the same way and everyone is welcomed in our community?
I don't know if I don't know if I'd be the one to answer that. I know Kevin Schuttinger is going to be presenting later, or Dr. Stallo. From my perspective, I wouldn't be the one to give you the best answer to that, Melissa.
I'd be happy to speak to that. I think as with any of our cultural liaison roles, really as we look at language opportunities for people in the community to be able to collaborate and partner with parents, we want to make sure that all parents and families have the support they need. And we have some populations in our school district that need additional support, especially around language, and we want to be sure that they're supported.
Are there any other questions, comments?
I guess I would say that we have more Asian and we have more Middle European students in our community, and we don't have a cultural liaison for them. So I would say that that would not be equitable to have that liaison in our staffing.
Any other comments? Jonathan?
I will just say that I'm happy to hear that we have the ability to add that position. I think it's very advantageous and helpful to be able to provide some more support for folks who need it. The fact that the funding is coming from an MDE grant is great. Even if we were having to fund this out of the budget, it was something during a time of budget challenges. I don't know that we could do it, but it would be something I would support if it were not funded by a grant. So I think this is a great addition, and I'm happy to see it as an option.
Any other comments? Roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Nay.
That motion carries 5-1. You have the,
Next one, 9B, is terms and conditions and agreements. Even with pandemic, obviously, we need to continue with negotiations and paying our folks. And so just like with the principals that started, we are continuing to work with different groups. Two of them that I bring forward today are the custodians and the Prior Lake Savage Administrators Association. I put a summary in there of percentages consistent with what we had been negotiating with other groups in the past, and also to reflect the reduction that we are trying to capture from administrators as we went through negotiations as outlined last spring and summer. There was a reduction in PD dollars with the administrators group, just like with the principals group previously.
okay, do I have a motion to approve the contract agreements for custodians and maintenance and the Prior Lake Savage administrators?
So made.
Jonathan, second? Is
Second.
that Melissa?
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
I do,
Mary?
yes, and I'm sorry, I believe Jim broke up a little bit when he was talking about, something about the reduction in administration. He was breaking up. Jim, could you
Sure.
please repeat that?
Yes, if you remember the board direction last spring or early summer when we talked about budget reductions was to gain a certain dollar amount from administrative cuts. And so what we have been doing is reducing PD dollars in year one of the contracts in both the principals and in this group with administrators to realize that board directed reduction.
Okay, and could you clarify for me how that related to the additional positions you were discussing? Because where you kind of cut off was custodian. And,
No additional positions.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any comments, other comments, questions? I'd just like to say thank you for getting those contracts resolved and for both sides.
Yeah, we got a long
Working
ways to
together on
go,
it, so-
but this is a good start.
Yep. Okay, roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Job descriptions.
We have a whole bunch of them. One of them is the East African Cultural Liaison position. Like I said, it's in line with some of the other liaison position that we have. So nothing too different there. It's pretty much the same. And then even with COVID and with building, Maureen and Jim have been extremely busy, and they decided to go through and rewrite and make all of their job descriptions under the maintenance custodial side up to date, which hadn't been a very long time. So they went through that whole process. So what you have there is all of their work related to updating all of those to make them consistent and up to date.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the job descriptions?
So made.
So made.
I'm not sure the
Second.
second. Mary? Second by Mary. Any comments or questions? Jim, from what you said, or there were no real significant changes, they were just updated and?
Right.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary? Mary?
Rosemary.
Mary's froze. Melissa?
Aye.
Melissa?
Nay.
That motion carries 5-1. I think that's it. Thank you, Jim. There's no unfinished business this evening, so we'll move into new business. This is the 2019-20 audit approval. This was presented at the board study session and reviewed there and with a lot of discussion. If there's any other minimal questions, those can be asked this evening. Julie's coming forward.
Good evening, Board Chair, Dr. Stallo, board members. Tonight, Jim Eichten is back before the board. He will do a short presentation, PowerPoint presentation, as you had already mentioned, that we have had long discussion at our previous meeting. And so I just want to welcome back Jim Eichten, who is a partner with MMKR.
That is great. Thanks, Julie, for having me. Members of the school board, superintendent, thanks for having me. My name is Jim Eichten with MMKR CPAs. As preferenced in the opening remarks, we did have a long discussion of the audit results at the work session that occurred about a week ago. And my point this evening is to shorten that up and just cover some of the highlights of the what we discussed at that point. I do have a PowerPoint that I'll just quickly go through. Certainly the role of the auditor is important in this discussion. It is the requirement of the state of Minnesota that the district complete a comprehensive annual financial report. That report was provided to the school board this evening. It's about 150 pages long, and there's lots of discussion and historical information, not only for fiscal year 2020, but goes back about 10 years in a variety of other areas. The auditor's role in this particular process is to audit that financial statement. Audit requirements also require us to test your internal controls over those financial reports. We also test your compliance with federal awards, which is identified as a single audit of federal awards. And then we issue an opinion on your compliance with state laws and regulations. There's a list of laws that we test that are provided by the Office of the State Auditor here in the state of Minnesota. We do issue what's also then called a management report, and then that management report is a communication of the audit results for the year. That document is actually prepared by my firm and provides a summary of audit results as well as financial information, which I'll touch on briefly. In that particular management report, you'll see a list of opinions that were issued. The first opinion is on the comprehensive financial report, the financial statements of the district. We were able to issue a clean opinion that is technically an unmodified opinion based on rule, but I like to use the word clean. It seems to be a better word in this forum. We did issue in that opinion an emphasis of a matter. This particular year, there were some changes in the accounting for student activities, which are covered under GASB Statement 84, Governmental Accounting Standards GASB Statement on fiduciary activities. That particular statement is emphasized in the opinion that it does have an impact on the financial statements, mainly because you're rolling those into your main statement versus issuing separate statements. We did issue then the other three opinions I mentioned. Collectively, we had about 5 findings, or not about, we did have 5 findings to report. We did issue in our internal control opinion some findings related to the financial statement preparation, including the adjustments that were provided. That opinion provides also, the result of that opinion also provides what we call a corrective action plan. The district is required in any audit, is required to submit a corrective action plan. That particular plan will be coordinated this next fiscal year to eliminate the findings that we talked about. That should be the focus of not only the district, but also the school board in following up on that corrective action, making sure those adjustments are being made in the 2020 fiscal year so that these findings that we have here are eliminated as they come back in the future. As I mentioned, the single audit federal awards, we had 2 findings in that area, specifically to procurement. Most of that was in the school lunch program as it related to some of the activities happening in purchasing in that area, as well as the compliance with suspension and debarment. You are required to verify your procuring from appropriate vendors and their standards in that we have a finding on. And lastly, I mentioned the compliance with Minnesota legal compliance. There was some 2 findings related, one to coding. There is a standard set of coding requirements here in the state of Minnesota that you're required to follow, and found some findings in that area, as well as you're required to verify that your vendors are appropriately withholding from their vendors as well. And there is a requirement that we issued in that standard. So all in all, we did have a number of findings, and as mentioned, all of those have corrective action plans that the finance office has been already working on for months, given that, maybe not months, but maybe month since this report came out, and certainly they expect all of the findings to be eliminated next fiscal year. So with that, I'm going to move forward to my presentation. We do provide financial information, which to me is the second part of the audit, the first part being how you're doing it from a compliance perspective, second part, how you're doing financially. We do provide information on the formula that the schools are provided funding to. As you can see here, some of the funding has been pretty consistent over the last several years at 2%. Cautionary tale to that. I think many of us would be happy with 2% given the current economic status of the state of Minnesota. So certainly something to watch for, but 2021 is certainly set in standard. Well, it looks like my PowerPoint got a little cut off here, but I will show the statewide fund balances. We do use as a tool in your analysis in looking at fund balances as a percentage of expenditures. That particular fund balance percentage is important to really the stability of the school and the statewide funding of our educational system, in that districts have funds set aside for future use, really for emergencies or for contingencies or for things that happen. At the end of the year, I believe your percentage in that this particular presentation was about 19%, about 20, sorry, yours is at 16%. Statewide, it's about 20%. That can differ. The yellow line is actually statewide, blue is your line. And you can see that your fund balances are very consistent with the overall financial position of the district. And statewide, it trends a little bit higher, but consistent as well. So no concerns to report in that particular area. We do have some other information on revenues and expenditures. This data gets pretty small, but I did want to highlight one item that's a noteworthy item here. The district receives about $14,600 per student on an annual basis. That's about $2,000 less per student than your average district in the metro area, and about $1,000, maybe $1,500, almost $1,000 than a student statewide. That really has a component of formulas and really the funding of formulas to the district, including some of the referendum dollars that you're getting. So the district, just based on this particular data, is operating at a significantly less revenue per student than its comparable districts. Really not a concern to me, but it's more of a point of knowledge and data that you should be aware of. We also then provide a lot of data on expenditures. You probably can't see that here, but overall, that impacts your expenditures and the amount you have available to spend on students. Most of the data that I show here does show that your administrative areas are below the trend lines, and overall your spending at the regular instruction levels and the special education levels are consistent with the revenue dollars you're receiving. You're having less dollars, so you're spending less dollars in that regard. We do provide information on general fund financial position. Here you can see that the general fund financial position, which is the blue line, the yellow line is really the fund balance. And those particular trend lines are good. I think the end of the fiscal year, you can see that here, the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures ended the year at 14.2% in your general fund. The district does guide its financial policies based on a fund balance policy. Most school districts do. That particular fund balance policy guides that you have 8 to 12% of operating budget. So at the end of fiscal 2020, you ended the year at 14%, which is above that particular policy range. Important for administration and school board members to be knowledgeable of that particular area as you make decisions going forward. You can see here in some of the, obviously the graph got mischaracterized a little bit, but so we do provide information on other governmental funds. The other governmental funds, the first one on the left is your food service fund. Your food service fund did show increased fund balance for the year. At the end of the year, the food service fund has about, let me just quickly about 28% of fund balance, so almost a quarter of operating fund balance in your fund balance, which shows certainly stable environment. The community service fund is as you can see, is struggling a bit in that it's about 12% at the end of the year. Not bad, going back to the fund balance policy, but as you can see, the trend line not only last year, given some of the COVID environment we were in, as well as going into this year, those funds are going to struggle. I did want to also point out one last item I think was important an emphasis. The district does also offer an internal service fund for its self-insured medical plans. Some of the financial results in that particular fund did show improvements, and the district has a very stable environment when it comes to the self-insured fund for health insurance. So. With that, I'll provide a summary. We did provide an opinion on the district's comprehensive financial report. That particular comprehensive financial report you see here will be submitted to the Association of School Business Officials for achievement. I know that the district has received that achievement in the past. We did discuss the findings that were reported in the corrective action plan that goes with those. We do see that the district's financial results do adhere to the reflected budgets that you have, albeit the financial results were better than projected, mostly related to the COVID environment. Most of the expenditures that you see at the end of last year were lower than projected, given some of the change that happened at the end of the fiscal period. And then, as I already mentioned, that you do have a focus on those corrective action plans that were provided to you. So with that, overall, things are moving forward with this audit, and I'll open it up to questions for you.
Okay, as we stated, we had quite a discussion last time.
Yeah, we did.
Does anyone have any other questions since that time? Jonathan?
I might. I would like to say publicly, I mentioned it in the study session, but a year ago or so, a couple of board members made the recommendation that we put the audit out for bid, and I do think it's good to have a fresh set of eyes. So grateful to your firm, to MMKR for taking that on, and it is nice to see, to hear a different voice. So appreciate that. I'll just ask one question. If you were a taxpayer in this district, what would you feel about the financial position of the school district?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to make 2 points there. You referenced that I am a new auditor, and I am the this is my first time in being here. And, you know, certainly our audit process is different than any other auditor, not any other auditor, but other auditors. And really our focus is different. And some of the things you're seeing here this evening, some of the financial results and we show and some of the findings that we show are part of the result of that. And you'll see that going forward, that my focus won't change. Given that I'm the new auditor, I'll continue to be consistent. To answer your second question on financial results, you know, the part of that stands out to me is the stability throughout the district when it comes to financial results. There's a graph here that shows fund balance at the end of the year, and it literally has not changed within a percentage point in over a decade. That shows stability. The ability, and I haven't been here for all those years, so I don't know the results, but I can see in that graph that the district overall observations and oversight over the fund balance and the equity position is clear, that it is managed quite closely, and you're staying within the policies that you put as a school board towards that, and making sure you have the right fund balance and ability to operate. Why that's important to me is what's happening with our environment currently. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and things are going to be challenging for sure. And you have something to fall back on when it comes to your financial position. You might not end the year at that consistent bar next year, which has probably nothing to do with the control here. But overall, yes, very consistent fund balance, great, good financial position, and overall, very financially healthy organization.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Stacy, I'm sorry.
Just with, you know, what's going on with the pandemic, and the challenges that I think all districts are gonna be facing. And I know what our fund balance policy is. And I think a year from now, I'll be interested to see, you know, where we are with the line, just what, the kind of work we have to do. Is there anything you can, I guess, give us as guidance as far as that? I mean, knowing that the state's bleak as far as funding, and then knowing, you know, that I feel like there's gonna be pressure for us to, you know, cut or, you know, reduce our fund balance for a short period of time. I don't know, I guess I just get your thoughts on that. Is that something that you see, you know, as a one-time type thing, or, you know, do we stay the course?
Right. Yeah, the observations that I would make, you know, on your financial position, they don't come through here, you know, on your results. Let's go back to June of 2020. So a lot of things have happened differently since June of 2020. Probably the state funding piece is probably the biggest concern that I have. You know, even at 2%, you provide 2% funding to an organization like this, that's not even enough.
Right.
And you've been doing that for how many years did I throw up there? 9, or 8 or 9 probably. So you've already been operating in an environment for probably a decade with limited resources. And now you're looking at not getting any resources, potentially. That's a difficult proposition. My advice, kind of going back to your question though, is it should be a longer range perspective in your decision making. It shouldn't be a one-time thing. You have the ability to you know, press that out over a few years, given the fund balance that you have, and use some of that fund balance to get over this. Let's hope it's a one-year blip. Cross your fingers, but your perspective shouldn't just be 1 year. You should be looking out 4 to 5 years, frankly.
Mary?
Well, basically, thank you for going into that, because that was my next question. Our long-term strategic budget and goals, I'm not sure if you reviewed that, or if you're just recommending that we should start looking out more than a year.
I did not review that. My opinions and my audit is based on accurate financial reporting. I'm here to report the data and tell you that this is the data. My comments more relate to, you know, here's the risks, if you will. And it's really up to you and the board and the management to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was gonna ask one more question, just to clarify. I know that we asked a ton of questions in the study session. So I reiterate what other people, please, listen to those questions or listen to the study session, because we're not gonna reiterate all those, right now. If you could clarify, some of these numbers in your financial report are based upon fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and some of them fiscal year of the state, which ends June 30th, 2020. Could you, are these balances that you're showing here as far as our fund balance, that's as of the end of the state year, right? The June 30th?
Yeah, so all of the data that we provided in our financial report is as of June 30th, 2020. And the data that we would have provided in some of the management report might reflect back on what's happening at the legislature back in that time, or, you know, the state's data, but all of the data related to the district would have been June 30th, 2020.
Thank you for that. I know that the tax revenue data and the other fiscal data did end on December 31st with some of the overarching, with a much larger report. I just, thank you for that clarification.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve.
Could I just have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to take a moment to thank Jim and his colleagues for the hours and long work that you did on behalf of the district, and also Julie Sink and her business office for another tremendous job. As with, you know, all of the additional work that we have, when we think of what we went through this summer in terms of pandemic planning, in terms of all of the additional work for her staff to do an incredible job in this audit, deserves recognition. So thank you, Julie, and to your staff as well.
I'll take a motion to approve the audit.
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
Second?
By Jonathan. I would echo what Dr. Stalo just said. Thanks for all the work. I know it's a lot of extra work each year. And with a new firm, it's a little bit different. So thank you for your work as well.
Thank you.
That's a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you. We'll move on now to the Ready to Learn plan update, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Stalo.
Excellent, thank you very much. Dr. Shettinger is making his way to assist with the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Shettinger. This evening, good evening, Chair Shimmick and board members, leaders who are in the DSC, and to community members who are listening tonight. Tonight I'm presenting to you with confidence in the district's pandemic planning, with sadness and disappointment in the community spread and the increase in COVID-19 cases, which is requiring us to need to transition to distance learning at our secondary level. And I'm presenting with continued gratitude to our staff for their outstanding work in providing our students with great learning experiences and services through this public health crisis. I ask that during this presentation, we all remember that we're making decisions not in a normal time, but during a pandemic. So this evening we have several staff members that we celebrated during Laker Pride with us tonight, along with all of their colleagues across the district, who are going to showcase some of the excellent teaching and learning that's happened across the district. And just as we feel like the routines and rhythms of the year are in place and we're growing in confidence, the case rates of COVID-19 are requiring us to make an immediate learning model change at the secondary level, which we'll talk tonight more about the data, the process, the transition, and activities in athletics as well. So as we look first at our learning model, our focus has always been, regardless of the learning model, our focus in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools is on instructional excellence and building strong relationships that's vital to student success. And as we navigate this pandemic and change much about what we do, Our staff have remained grounded in our district strategic plan, our district identity, and the strategic directions that drive our work as we strive to ensure that our mission comes to life for all students. So as you hear our teachers tonight, I want you thinking about and paying attention to expanding innovation to improve the learner experience, which is happening all over this district. You'll also hear our commitment to E-STEM, to inquiry, to project-based learning and outdoor learning as another pillar of who we are. So board members, as you think about your operational oversight, I wanted to make that connection to innovation and E-STEM tonight. I also want to invite you to follow our teachers on Twitter, especially as you look at the hashtag of Teach Outdoors Minnesota. You'll see many of our staff and students learning outside, regardless of the subject or content area, and regardless of the weather. So at this point, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Kevin Schuttinger, our Director of Teaching and Learning, who has done an absolutely outstanding job leading us and advancing rigorous instruction and personalized learning through new learning models and new strategies and work that they're doing. So thanks, Kevin, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Stella. Good evening, Chair Shimmick, board members. I'm proud to share some of the great work we've done and we will continue to do as we weather the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has called our teachers to adapt to an unprecedented challenge, as we all know, and they have risen to that challenge and then some. Our principals and all of our other administrators have also risen to that challenge, often reacting to changing guidelines from MDE, changing county and local health data that we have to respond to on a very quick basis. So our administrative team has risen to the challenge, our teachers have risen to the challenge, and I am proud and humble to share some of their amazing work to serve all of our students every single day during this unprecedented global health pandemic. I'd like to highlight Jamie Chilson. First, she's gonna make her way in just a second. She is a 5th grade teacher in Five Hawks. And as you know, we have spun up an entire distance learning academy at the elementary level. Maybe she's right outside the door. At the elementary level, and our elementary teachers who are teaching our hybrid students have really adapted amazingly quickly from really adopting the hybrid model in August and early September to really hitting the ground and hitting a really amazing groove now. And Jamie Chilson will tell you a little bit more about what she is doing in hybrid learning for our students. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Jamie Chilson. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Five Hawks Elementary, and I think when I was first asked to present in this fashion and share some of the highlights, it was kind of hard just because this is a year unlike any other, and I feel brand new once again. But after working through a lot of some of the challenges, there has been some good things that have come out, and I think the first thing that we established and did that is we kind of created a sense of a team within the classroom, within teachers, within parents, because this isn't just what's happening in school. This also needs to be carried over at home. And then with that, at the beginning of every week, I send out their at-home learning plan for the week, and within that, it's embedded with different links, videos, other resources that my students will need. Every day there's 2 different synchronous opportunities that they can tune into. We have daily office hours, and my team shares that, so the kids have multiple times and opportunities to check in with a teacher. And then also just sending out just weekly updates, keeping the parents in the know and just keeping them doing that. And then one of the things that I thought, well, if we're wondering what's going well, let's just ask my students. So I just recorded that, and we can share what they had to say about it.
I like that we do have checklists, and that we can have, we have longer subjects and more to learn. That you always give us a checklist on Seesaw and the 5th grade learning site, and that it always has the links to the different things that we need, and that you always have in case we need help, you have meetings.
I like being able to switch back and forth to, like, from home to school and then back and forth. And then when we're at home, you can get done a lot faster.
I like of how you put the links in and for the checklist and how like everything's updated. So like if we need to go to the checklist, we always have it and like it's nothing that's not ready for us to go. I usually take a break from what I'm doing and then when I feel like I'm ready, I come back to that work.
Yeah, so that's, it's kind of, I'm not quite sure how to go back to.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Jamie.
You know,
Thanks, Jamie.
Jamie spoke a bit to some of those key tenets of hybrid and distance learning K-12. You'll see some of those things pop out here. The checklist that has the links in a clear and consistent, predictable place to find it, using Seesaw and then secondary Schoology really clearly and really predictably. That makes that partnership between school and home much easier to manage. And you will see that, and I will say that doesn't happen by accident. What you'll see with that checklist and some of the things she mentioned about Seesaw are the result of a lot of work of the teaching and learning team and the elementary and secondary administrative team to come to consensus about what those expectations should be and then make sure that everyone has the training and support to make them happen. You will also hear some about office hours. That is the work of the administration coming to say, here is the schedule that can provide the best support for our teachers and students in a hybrid setting. Next up, we have some teachers from our Distance Learning Academy at the elementary level. First, we have Anna Trimberger. And to give you some perspective and a quick reminder, we have spun up a new school in the past 4 months. Starting in August, when we got Governor Walz's order that we had to provide distance learning options for all students, we have spun up a distance learning academy with currently about 600 students across K-5. Melissa Canettle has done an incredible job leading that, and we have amazing teachers as a part of that as well. Anna Trimberger is one of our kindergarten teachers at La Ola del Lago, and she's going to highlight some of her amazing practices. Anna?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm so excited to talk about La Ola del Lago, our immersion school. So I'm going to start with month and a half of preparation of how this kindergarten immersion was going to look like. I can say that we were working with teachers in Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, just to grab ideas of how immersion is going to look like for kindergartners in a hybrid or DLA or distance learning setting. So we were so fortunate to work with Tara Fortune, which is an immersion specialist, and we just brainstormed ideas of what we could do. We were running both scenarios. At the time, we didn't know, so we were running hybrid. What can we do for hybrid? What can we do for distance learning? How can we use all the immersion best practices to make this the best experience for these little ones? And one of the things that we actually came across was just relationships. How are we going to build relationships and make sure that we're creating this, the first experience for these kiddos in school? How is this going to be positive for them? So that was the first thing that we talked about. Language acquisition, it's important, but those relationships are even more important. So that's what we talked about. We also talked about parents. How are we going to be working with parents? How are they going to be our co-teachers and our allies to make sure that we are doing the same things at home and we're practicing that? And that was another point that we were talking about, and just creating a safe environment, not just for the kids, but for the parents as well, just to have that communication and open communication. We also were talking about bridging languages, so not thinking about just English and Spanish as, well, this or that, more thinking of as a whole, so the student's language repertoire, and thinking about how can I provide those connections between English and Spanish so that could help the parents and the kiddos at home as well. So just making sure that those connections and associations were done in their L1 and their L2. Open communication with families is so important. I am sending constantly emails to check in with families. How is this doing? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Also sending surveys. Sometimes it's just that formative assessment that we call it in education, just with parents as well. And we actually we're starting our parent support group in my distance learning kindergarten class this week. So what we do is just open it up. Parents will share their ideas. I am not there to judge. It's just an open space to talk about things and to see what other families are doing. We are also implementing our new curriculum, Benchmark Taller. So we are implementing this as in the DLA and hybrid model. So this was something new for us. And we are doing this with the guidance of Silvia Dorta Duque de Reyes, which is a researcher and a specialist in language development. And she has guided us to make the best decisions for our kids right now. The way that we need to be teaching, again, bridging those languages. So that has been great to see. Having those Wednesday Flex Days groups are providing more opportunities to meet with students one-on-one and in a small group settings as well. I'm gonna go to the next slide. Okay, how do I do that? Thank you. We started about 2 years ago our PBIS framework at Loyola del Lago, and we teach our expectations, which are our waves. Being a worker, being accountable, value everyone, and be safe. So we're making sure from day one we're teaching those expectations, and those were expectations that we also a little bit tweaked it for DLA students. So as hybrid students, DLA students receive their WAVES tickets, which recognizes the students that are showing WAVES. And there is a WAVES winner every week. And they are able to eat lunch with a friend, talk with a teacher, play a game with a teacher, chat with friends, making sure that those relationships are still going and that they are engaged in that social, emotional part as well. I am incorporating movement all the time within the transitions in the lessons. It has helped them to get very engaged, also making connections with the world, making sure that they are enjoying the company of the friends and the teacher. Right here, I don't know if you can see it, here is Annabelle. One of the parents created a Meet the Teacher in a park, and I gave them a pumpkin, and we did a pumpkin investigation. So they were able to use their pumpkin and just measure it, count the seeds, so we're putting everything together. Actually, this Friday, we're gonna have our first eSTEM day, so it's everything around eSTEM, and we're super excited about that. I'm just gonna take more time just to thank every single one of my students, their families for all the support and their trust, and all the grace that they have given me, to my family, because I am taking longer hours for work and making sure that I'm giving feedback to my students, which makes me go to bed at midnight or later, and also to my great kindergarten team. It's amazing to work with those ladies. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is no best practice book for immersion kindergarten distance learning. Anna and her colleagues are literally writing it right now. And you'll hear some of the hallmarks of a great education and a great teacher, those caring and committed relationships, rigorous instruction that meets kids where they're at, and thinking outside the box, being creative and learning on a day-to-day basis and being reflective. Kelly Stuft is another one of our first grade teachers from the Distance Learning Academy, and I would love to introduce her to tell a little bit more about first grade. Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Kelly Stuft. I am a first grade teacher in the Distance Learning Academy this year. As you can imagine, there's a steep learning curve to teaching early learners over the computer. So we went very slow to go fast, as I like to say. So in the beginning of the school year, we had a lot of focus on routines, structure, consistency, and not rolling out too much at once. So every week we tried to try 1 or 2 more things. And that wasn't just to benefit our students, but that was also to benefit their parents, who at this age do provide a great deal of support, especially when something's brand new. But now that we're about, almost into the second quarter, I would say that things are going very smoothly. I have been very impressed with the independence that my first graders are now showing at this point in the year. So that hard work has paid off. Another thing we had to focus really hard on and be creative with is how to build community. So that's trickier also over the computer. And not so much community just between teachers and students, but students and students. So we had to be very intentional about how we could make this happen. One of my favorite ways we do this is through the Seesaw blog. So Seesaw has a blog component. And a student can send me a picture or a video, and I can post it onto the blog that's public just for our class to see. And they can view each other's pictures and videos, and they can also comment. So sometimes I do this for academic purposes, but a lot of times kids just like to send me pictures of themselves like reading with their dogs and on a nature hike on the weekend, and that's how they can get to know each other and what their lives are really like. So I'll post those on the blog, they'll comment, voice comments, emojis and words, and get to know each other that way. Class breakfasts have been really fun, so every Wednesday I start class 20 minutes early for anybody who wants to join me for breakfast. We have lots of dress-up days in first grade, lots of fun dressing up. I have a question of the day that they can answer and see each other's answers. And recently we've been able to try the Google Meets breakout rooms. So sometimes I'm working on doing that for more academics, like turn and talk virtually or small groups, but sometimes I do it just for strictly social emotional purposes. First graders have an easier time talking in that small group setting and kind of opening up to each other. We use a lot of different platforms to get the job done, obviously Seesaw, but IXL has been an excellent way to provide differentiated instruction and high quality independent work at home. Also, RazKids Plus, I would say, has been critical to my small group instruction. It's really one of the only ways I have where I can get a common text in all of my students' hands at once. So through RazKids Plus, we have access to the same books. I can also share my screen so we can read it together, and they can then go back and reread it on their own at home. Obviously, Epic is great for creating enthusiastic readers, but I've also really changed to using it for my read-alouds. Because I share my screen, the book is right in front of them. They can follow along with me, and I can even use my mouse to point to the words as I go. So we can do some shared reading components with that as well. Finally, obviously there's a lot of challenges that we're facing this year, so it's fun to focus on the positives. And for me, one of my biggest benefits and excitements about distance learning is it has really allowed me the time to teach a lot of small groups. So we know that small group instruction is very powerful, but it can be tricky to do in the typical setting as often as you'd like due to just time constraints and schedules, and you're also managing a whole lot of other students at the same time. But through the beauty of DLA, I get to have these really focused small group lessons. And on the next slide, I just took a quick snapshot of what my reading groups were doing last week. So I currently have 5 reading groups for 21 first graders. I'm able to see 4 of those groups 3 times a week. I see 1 of those groups twice a week. So last week alone, you can see my group A was learning about digraphs. My group B, we read a book together and we were focusing on the setting of the story. Group C was reviewing all of their short vowel sounds and reading and writing their CVC words. Group D, I utilized the press intervention program to focus in on 1 short vowel sound. And Group E was we were reading a nonfiction book together and discussing how we read nonfiction differently than fiction. So as you can see, I'm able to accomplish a lot in those small groups. I'm also able to have multiple math small groups a day. And I'm noticing that a lot of those light bulb moments really come on during those small group times. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I want to clap each time.
Again, as you can see, we are writing the best practice book for distance learning. This is how you provide personalized learning to students based on what they need, when they need it. This is how you engage them in small groups. This is how you use the relationships that you built to keep them engaged. Our secondary teachers, much like our elementary teachers, have risen to the challenge of providing hybrid and distance learning to our older students. Our secondary hybrid and distance learning program has been built around the idea that we want PLSAS teachers, PLSAS rigor, and PLSAS support. And our teachers are balancing hybrid and distance learning students every single day, every single period. And this allows our students to keep their schedules, to keep their classes that they're highly engaged in, German, calculus, think AP chemistry, and to help them continue to make progress towards graduation. First up, we have Allison Short, who is a middle school math teacher at Hidden Oaks.
Good evening to the school board and Dr. Stallo. I am Allison Short, and I teach 7th and 8th grade math at Hidden Oaks. As with any year, a top priority for me as an educator is building strong relationships with my students. Going into this school year, knowing that I was only going to see some students twice a week and other students only through a computer screen, this was especially important this year. So beginning of the school year, I really just took time to focus on getting to know my students, their interests, their abilities, and what makes them unique. I did this through surveys, get to know you activities, and individual conversations. Along with this, I'm also in constant communication with my students and their families through Schoology and Infinite Campus to maintain these relationships as well as communicate student progress. For instruction, my at-home learners have the option to attend live synchronous lessons through Google Meets or watch recorded videos at home. For the Google Meets, they log in during their hour and they receive the same instruction that the in-person students receive as well. They can chat in the chat section or they can turn their microphone on and verbally respond as needed. For the students at home, I use Edpuzzle lessons so that they can watch pre-recorded lessons that are interactive. So throughout the lessons, I ask questions and they submit their responses so that I can assess once they have completed the lesson whether or not they've understood the content. I post weekly learning plans for the students, as do all of the teachers at our school. This provides them an outline for lessons, learning targets, assessments, assignments, and just anything they need to know for the week. These are posted every Friday for the following week so that parents and students can look them over and make sure that they are prepared for the week ahead. In a typical school year, I use shared materials, collaborative activities for student engagement, but with the restrictions of the school year, I had to rely heavily on technology tools. So I was able to find a lot of different tools that students could use in the classroom and at home simultaneously or at their own pace. I found tools such as virtual bingo boards, so we could play bingo together, quizzes, Kahoot, Gimlet, Flipgrid, and Jamboard, and they've all been really successful in having that student engagement. Like all things in 2020, just as things were going really smoothly and I was really starting to feel great about my teaching strategies, I did get sick and tested positive for COVID-19. I struggled with some symptoms for a few days, but luckily started feeling better and was able to teach virtually from home. So during that time, I had wonderful classroom monitors in my room that were watching my students, and a webcam was set up so that I could both see and hear my students in the classroom. During this time, I joined through a Google Meet, and as you can see on the slide, they could see myself as well as my slide as I was teaching. The one thing that I struggled with was not being able to see my students' work and help them in real time. So I did discover some virtual whiteboards that I had students open up on their iPads. So as I was teaching, they opened up these virtual whiteboards, and I could see their work in real time on my computer screen. So as an example on the slide, we were practicing translations and reflections on a coordinate grid for 7th grade math. And so we're graphing pumpkins. So as I was graphing on my screen at home, they were graphing on their iPads at school, and I was able to see in real time whether or not they understood it or if they needed additional support. Along with that, the Google Meet breakout rooms have been very successful in providing individual instruction for students, as well as giving them the opportunity to work with small groups so they can discuss and talk about their thinking. So that's what's been happening in my classroom and at home, and I thank you for the opportunity to share that with you. Thanks.
That's dedication. And that is the dedication you will see from our teachers every single day as they work endlessly, day and night, to help our students through one of the most challenging parts of their lives. Alexis Serafeas is an English and science teacher at Bridges, and I will say, you all know Bridges. Bridges is never one to miss an opportunity to learn and grow, and this time the pandemic provided it. Bridges has been working to shift to a project-based learning model over the last several years. And this year, they were all set to head off on that in earnest, and then, the COVID-19 pandemic started. And instead of saying, nope, we're gonna retrench into our old practices, they said, let's learn and grow through this, and let's learn and grow because we believe this will better serve our students. And I'm really excited to have Alexis share some of those amazing practices that she's bringing to life for our Bridges students every day.
Thank you. Before anything else, I want to thank the community for the building that has been provided to us. If we were still in the strip mall in Northgate, I think that COVID would have been extremely difficult for us. Even at about a quarter of our population, we would have struggled to comply with social distancing. So We are, as always, extraordinarily grateful to the community for making these resources accessible to us. So, as Kevin said, we launched our project-based learning program this year. We have been working up towards that for a couple, 2-3 years now, and COVID happened, but we figured no reason to waste perfectly good momentum. So we went in for that, and that's actually been quite helpful. It has actually kind of lessened the burden, and I'm very happy with how it's been turning out pardon me, so far. So project-based learning, I will give you guys the elevator pitch. The idea is that we allow students to select a real-world topic that they are interested in, that they are engaged with. They use it to craft a driving question, and then they work with teachers across disciplines to find a way to meet standards in their different classes while exploring this topic. It's really produced some fascinating results. It's created great teacher-student relationships. It's increased our engagement. And it's really impressive to watch how well these students can do independently with, it's like when you're, teaching your kid to ride and you've taken the training wheels off and your hand's just right there, but they're pedaling and they're doing it. So it's been truly excellent. I wanted to share some examples of what our students are doing, and I had to narrow the list down a lot because there's impressive stuff happening. We have a student whose driving question was, what causes mental illness? She now has, I would say, a freshman college student's understanding of neurochemistry. She is looking for biology and chemistry products, or biology and chemistry credits, and she is producing a product to demonstrate that learning. She is making a set of diagrams and flow charts of the movement of molecules in the brain, dopamine, serotonin receptors, and demonstrating that. She's also getting an English credit for her personal narrative that details her and her family's struggle with mental illness. We have a student whose question was, how can I create a paludarium? Which, I didn't know this, that's an aquarium that also has a dry space. It's what you would use for turtles or frogs. He built it by hand from scratch, did all of the measuring and cutting himself, had to do research on everything from what sealant can I use to make sure it doesn't leak, to nitrogen cycle and pH levels, how do I ensure the water stays clean, what invertebrates can I introduce, what fish will survive together and help each other, what plants are safe and what are toxic. And he will be getting a Fab Lab and a biology credit for that because he now has a sustainable ecosystem in a tank that he created himself. It's really delightful. He's showing me video. It's absolutely great. And we have a very intense young lady whose question was, what does slavery look like today? She is studying human trafficking. She is getting a law enforcement elective credit for the task forces that look for and stop human trafficking rings, as you know, an issue that affects us in this area, and an economics credit for the very terrifying question, what is a human life worth, that looks at the costs and the payouts and where money goes if you are moving someone from Malaysia or the Ukraine to the US to be sold. Again, very intense, but really impressive work. Can't speak highly enough of her. So what this does is it creates independent learners. It creates learners who have good time management skills, who are really able to go out there and think critically and drive their own learning and kind of use teachers more as support than as somebody to spoon feed them, this is what you should know because I said so and because the book says it. We've really seen them blossom very well. Engagement has been high. They've learned a bunch of applicable skills in terms of how do I think critically, how do I research things, how do I learn stuff when nobody is telling me, here's your list and do this, how do I kind of manage these large assignments and break them into small chunks. It's been really great to see them. They're getting the same credits that they always would have during our school year, but they're getting them in a way that is meaningful to them and connects to outside issues. So we've seen a ton of progress. We've seen really great questions come out of these kids. And I absolutely invite any of you to come and stop by and visit us sometime. We'd love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I've often talked about the 10-year transition in personalized learning. You are seeing years 8, 9, and 10 happening at Bridges every day. When we talk about learning that's personalized, purposeful, and empowered, that's what you're seeing. When you increase voice and choice for students, when you let them drive their own learning, they will drive it and they will do amazing things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the teaching and learning support. We have some unsung heroes in this district. Many of the things you've heard our teachers talk about are really the result of the supports and the professional development that our teaching and learning staff has provided. It's a team I am really proud to work with and lead every single day. They're incredible supports for teachers every single day and night, as they get a lot of late night texts, I know that. And they have been instrumental in the planning of our Jumpstart professional development, which happened before workshop week. We added that this year as we knew our teachers needed that additional support. We've also had ongoing professional support and development throughout the year, and it will continue. We've also worked to adopt some additional resources this year, knowing that it's a heavy lift and it's a heavy load on our teachers, both the hybrid and distance learning formats. So Edpuzzle and IXL are two that you've heard about tonight already. Those are two new adoptions this year that we knew would make distance and hybrid learning more engaging and effective for our students. My pat statement has been, if there is something that can make this easier for you as a teacher and better for our students, we will find a way. And we will find the money to make it possible for this year. The other thing you'll see on the right, just a little snapshot of our secondary fall planning framework. And what you'll see there is looking through hybrid, distance, and in-person learning through a variety of lenses, from instructional resources, from things like Schoology and Seesaw and our expectations for using that, from things like formative and summative assessment. How do we do those best in each of those scenarios? This is work we did with our administrative team and our BILTs back in August, and they have continued to serve us as we transition and prepare to transition throughout this year. I'm really proud to introduce Beth Layton and Chris Shiner to tell us about some of the elementary teaching and learning support they provided.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. I'm going to quickly just talk about one of the initiatives that we launched this year, which was a brand new initiative. Our goal is always to help guide teachers towards best practices, but also to lessen their workload. And we started a small cohort of premium content creators who create Seesaw lessons that are shared through the entire district. So a teacher just simply has to grab these, they have to assign them in their classroom, and that workload is taken off their plate. Not only that, but they're also built with a high amount of fidelity and a high amount of rigor that's allowing our teachers to have the best of both worlds, where they have less on their plate, but we can give things home to students that are powerful and meaningful.
One of the other things we've been working on most recently is not only taking those tools that we have in our district and using them to their fullest, but we've been creating some pacing guides for our teachers to help them to understand and prioritize and compact their curriculum, right? So knowing that they're in this hybrid teaching model, this helps them prioritize and compact so they know what to teach. So we do these in these pacing guides that are every subject for elementary. So that's one of the things we've been working on. The second thing that this little picture that you see with all the little bullets, this is something that we created on Teaching and Learning about 4 years ago, and we call it the Laker Learning Framework. It's simply a Google site in-house. We started it as Laker Math, Chris and I, 5 years ago, one tiny little snippet of an idea, and it has grown. Teaching and Learning has taken this, and we now use it. Teachers rely on it. It is a Google site that has all of our content areas for E12. We have resources on there. We have our pacing guides on there. We have updated assessments if teachers need to make small tweaks. Teachers, our math leadership team, our ELA, they can all go in there and add their resources. So it becomes a really great place for teachers to collaborate and share and create and use all these wonderful things so that they're kind of sharing the load a little bit. So that's something that has been another way that we're really supporting teachers is we're adding cool stuff to that all the time, and teachers are going back there and sharing and using it. So it's been really fun. So we're really proud of that too. So.
Thank you so much. You know, I've talked a bit about our work with professional learning and development. Gone are the days of one size fits all, come into a big room and maybe you learn something, maybe you don't. Ken Clam and Amanda Fay are our high school and middle school technology integration specialists. They're going to talk a little bit about some of the pointed, focused, personalized support sessions that we've developed for our secondary teachers. that have proven tremendously helpful. Amanda?
Good evening. First off, I just want to mention that, as Dr. Schuttinger mentioned, it truly is an honor to work as part of the teaching and learning team. And under his leadership, I feel like we have been given so much trust to really do what we need to do to support teachers. And like he said, his mindset has kind of been, if it will make life easier for the teachers, let's find a way to do it. And so it's truly an honor working with him. Working with our secondary teachers, a big part of secondary too is providing supports for parents and students in addition to supporting the teachers. So Ken and I have been working this year on creating documents that have kind of step-by-step directions for how to access tools and resources in our district, videos that showcase from the perspective of an iPad, which is the device students have, how to sign in, how to turn in this, how to access this, to make life easier for our distance and hybrid learners and have less of that back and forth for teachers so that they can simply send them the document or say, hey, remember we have this document, or they can just grab a video link quick and send it over. In addition to that, Ken and I have been doing a lot of work with teachers during hybrid and at-home learning and playing around with technology, webcams, conference mics, whatever can make it work to bring students that are at home into the classroom and students that are in the classroom into the homes of our students that are at home, because a lot of our distance learners crave that connection. So for example, Google Breakout Rooms and Google Meets has been a huge help with that, because now our students can all be in the same room together having conversations with one another.
In addition to some of the things Amanda mentioned, we started with a lot of PD in August. We really need to get ahead of some of this technology that was necessary to do hybrid learning and distance learning. One thing that we did was we evolved PD for teachers. We went to more of a choice model, which we saw increase attendance and engagement from our staff. We needed to make sure we taught teachers how to leverage our technologies and to keep up with best practices in this ever-changing educational world we live in. Lately in October, we kind of continued that, and we did our PD online through Google Meets. We were able to have large groups of people, I think at one, maybe 80 or 90, and we were keeping up to date with all the updates with the technologies we have. And really, with our role, we are on demand every minute of every day, like literally email, in a classroom, and so we have up-to-the-minute PD every single day, which is just great. Another thing that we worked with our school administrators on is creating norms for our technology. We want students to feel comfortable navigating our learning management system, which is Schoology. We want to get, and we're working towards this, and we've made a lot of progress, of getting the courses to look and have the same feel, to allow students to be able to go into every course, navigate it the same way. And for teachers, this helps with workflow, if students know how to do it because it's the same in every course. It really lowers the cognitive load we're asking of students when they know when they enter a course where to look for assignments, where to look for the weekly learning log, and those types of things. And we've continued that support throughout this quarter, and we will continue that moving forward as well. So we've done a lot of exciting things, and it's just ever changing in our world, and we appreciate you guys letting us do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Case.
I don't think it's an overstatement to say I'm not sure we'd be afloat without Ken, Chris, Amanda, and Beth, and they provide that on-the-moment, on-the-spot PD to our teachers every single day. I'm really proud to work with them. Dr. Stella?
And I am so proud of you, our team, the teachers who were here tonight representing all of our staff across the district. Lee, when you read the American Education Week proclamation, as you were reading it, I thought of every corner of this district and staff in every role that they play. And Kevin, you said it, these are our heroes. And it's not perfect. And teaching and learning in a pandemic is far from perfect, but the perfect effort and the perfect learning and the perfect collaboration and the perfect love that our staff are showing, and we got to witness just a tiny sliver of that. I'm so proud, and our community is so fortunate to have these staff members. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when we first planned the presentation this evening, that was the presentation. We really wanted board members and our community to get inside a classroom and to understand just a little bit of what our staff and our leaders have experienced and what they've learned in order to provide the absolute best educational experience to our students during a public health crisis. So when we first talked about this, right, in mid-October, we said, let's make sure in November we highlight our teachers and our staff. And then we've seen things change significantly. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about our COVID numbers. We're going to talk about our process, and we're going to talk a little bit about where we are. So this is a familiar slide to you. It is the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan parameters that you've seen and that our community members have come to look for in terms of the numbers. We've been implementing the Safe Learning Plan throughout the year, but I just wanted to provide this again just as that launch pad this year when the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan kicked off. And the next slide is that 5-step approach. Again, the guidance that was shared with us in July had this 5-step approach. And the county level was that first data point. At that time, if you recall, we didn't have any other data. That was the only data that we had. So that was really the first data point that we looked at in order to start making decisions about our learning models. Now that we're 2 months in to the school year, districts are working through that 5th step. And in the Safe Learning Plan, it actually says, after the initial selection of a learning model for school opening, the decision to shift to an alternative learning model should center on the impact of COVID-19 at the school level, while maintaining awareness of changes in viral activity in the community through continued review of the biweekly county-level case data. And as you know, we're reviewing data on a daily and a weekly basis. The next slide highlights a bit more about the state authority in the Minnesota Department of Health guidance. So I've just got an excerpt here from an October 30th communication that just reminds all of us as leaders. It came from the Minnesota Department of Education, and it reminds us all as leaders that really that step 5 is that place that we're in right now. And our regional support teams, which are Minnesota Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Health, and our public county health, help us make informed decisions around what they've come to term the scalpel approach. And that's really where we begin looking at that deeper data. The county data was that starting point, but then we're looking at that deeper data. And again, you've seen and heard us talk about not just the number or the county level data, but the number of confirmed cases, quarantines, those in close contact in each building, as well as the symptoms that folks have. So just wanted to remind you of that, and that's kind of that space that we're in right now. I also wanted to, as we have reviewed the data and made decisions about a learning model shift, I want to be clear that while we've been required to review local data, we do not have local control to go against state guidance. And I think that's a really important report and reminder to all of us. We're expected to review data, and then we have to have a consultation with our regional support team. Again, Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Education, and Scott County Health to ensure that they support our learning plan. And you'll see a timeline later of when we had that meeting. If agreement is not reached, if we were to go against, or if the regional support team said, nope, your plan is not, that's not the way you should be going, if we don't follow that, then the regional support team would elevate this concern to the state, who may impose changes in accordance with the executive order authority. So I think it's just very, very important that board members and our community understand that, again, as the Safe Learning Plan came out, and certainly it is our responsibility to look at our local data, we have to go within the parameters that was set apart by the Safe Learning Plan. And I wanted to add one more thing to the next slide. Thanks, Joe. I did request a legal opinion for the school district around the guidance provided through the Safe Learning Plan. And what that word guidance, because sometimes we hear that also from our community members, that it's just guidance. Well, what the legal counsel, the opinion that I received, is that the Safe Learning Plan is law. As a district, it's not a realistic option to ignore the law as it currently stands. So again, I just think it's important, and I understand that, you know, while we maybe wish there were different ways of doing things, I just want people to understand that we really do have to look at the data. That really is the piece that we have to then collaborate with and get support from the regional support team in order to move forward with decision-making. So I just wanted to review that with you. And at this point, I will hand it over to Joe, who's going to talk a little bit through the Learning Model Dial and some more specific data.
Thank you. Board Chair Schimmick, Dr. Stallo, board members. You've heard me talk over the last few board meetings about the moving of the dial. I want to do a little bit of review of some of the things we've talked about in the past, but then also add in new pieces that are relevant based on timelines and data that we've talked about. So one of the things that we do each week on Thursdays is we have our weekly Scott County meeting where Dr. Stallo and I have the opportunity to work with Scott County Public Health as well as all of the other school districts in Scott County to look at our county data. We know that the state releases on Thursday an official 14-day county case rate. We also know that that's a 2-week-old piece of data. We have the opportunity to look at preliminary numbers that bring us to a more current situation. As Dr. Stallo mentioned, that's our first step. At that point, then we begin to look at our district under that scalpel approach. We look at what are we seeing at our individual buildings, what are we seeing as district case counts, what are we seeing as levels, secondary, elementary, and that type of thing. We also go ahead and look at, with our incident command team, which meets right after the Scott County meeting, we start to look at other metrics that are important to be able to sustain whatever model it is that we are in. One thing I really want to make sure I point out is the staff coverage, because each week, especially over the last 2 weeks, that has been a particular area of concern as we've been seeing an increased number of staff absences and unfortunately a growing gap between the subs able to fill those positions. And so because of that, over the last few weeks, we've had an increasing number of staff that we've had to pull from their regular assignment to fill in for teachers or other staff who are unable to be there due to COVID-related issues. As I've mentioned before, other things we look at include student attendance, our health and safety operations, as well as child nutrition, transportation. One of the things Dr. Stallo mentioned was the fact that in order to make a change in the dial, you need to have a meeting with your regional support team. And so we had that meeting on Wednesday, November 4th. In that meeting, as she mentioned, we had representatives from the Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Education, Scott County Public Health, as well as our entire incident command team was present to be a part of that conversation. During that meeting, we had the opportunity to share with them our plan and recommendation based off of all of the pieces that we had been looking at as a district. As I just mentioned, everything from staffing to building local data. At that time, we had a timeline. That timeline was then sent out to all of our families in a communication last Thursday, November 5th. In that, we had a plan where we would be able to continue through the rest of Q2 with all of our secondary, be able to finish Q1, be able to start Q2 with bringing in students for a day of hybrid A learning, a day of hybrid B learning, and then we would transition to distance learning at that time. Beginning on Friday, as we always do, we continue to monitor data. As we looked at the data over the weekend and continued to watch it today, we noticed some significant increases that I'll be showing you in a minute. And unfortunately, that led us then to move a little bit quicker than we had hoped to move and sent out a more updated timeline that was sent out earlier today, and we'll talk about in a little bit. What you see right here is a graph of our 14-day case rate in Scott County. As I mentioned, this is our preliminary starting point. We see a solid line. The solid line ends on the week ending October 24th. That was the last official data point that was given to us by the state last Thursday. That was a number of 37.24. The dotted line shows you, and I was in contact with Scott County Public Health today just to get the most up-to-date number, and this is what they're telling us this week's data is going to be, is they're saying that Thursday's number they're projecting to be for Scott County at 60.68. That is a significant jump from one week to the next. As we asked them, what do they foreshadow for the week that just ended of November 7th, they said they see cases continuing to increase from that number.
And Joe, just as a reminder, the 37.32, those were the case numbers ending the week of October 24th.
Correct.
And that preliminary number that Scott County Health is forecasting, that would be for the week ending October 31st.
Correct.
Just want to remind folks of that lag, and I know there's other people that are looking at other data sources to see more real-time data.
Part of the process that we do under that scalpel approach is we start to look at our district's data. What are we seeing for cases in our district? And even more importantly, what are we seeing in cases from a secondary level and an elementary level? We want to have an idea of that. What we're seeing is we are seeing that our elementary buildings are mirroring the growth that we are seeing at the county level. And unfortunately, our secondary is actually exceeding the rate that we are seeing at the county level. A few weeks ago, we started sharing a district dashboard on our website, and part of that shares the opportunity to show the number of confirmed total cases for staff and students starting from the beginning of the school year, as well as our more real-time, how many have we had in the last 7 days. What you see on this screen is actually up to date as of 4 o'clock today, and I want to preface that because there have been cases that have come in since 4 o'clock today. But this is accurate as of 4 o'clock today. And I really want to point out some growth or change that has happened in this, and most particularly in the number of the cumulative cases, to give you an idea of why we had to make some of the moves that we had to make. If you look at our student cases on the dashboard, when we posted the dashboard on Thursday, November 5th, we had 34 student cases. In 4 days, that number jumped to 64 student cases. We look at staff, we were at 26 on Thursday, and that number has moved up to 34 in 4 days. As we look at this, this shows us kind of a weekly breakdown of our staff and student growth. This is through last week, not accurate for today or current for today because we're just on Monday. We'll have an updated version of this on our dashboard when we update the dashboard on Thursday. One of the things I want to point out is, and this was part of the communication that went out, is the fact that the Minnesota Department of Health started posting earlier this year schools that have had 5 or more cases within the last 14 days. Those schools are publicly identified on a list. The schools remain on that list until they can prove that they can be COVID-free for 28 straight days. Prior Lake High School made that list last week, and we anticipate having another secondary school make that list this coming week as well. At this point, I'm going to shift back to Dr. Stallo so she can continue talking about kind of the transition and plans that we've come up with and talked about based off that data.
Thank you, Joe, and I just want to once again thank Joe for his leadership. This has been an absolutely extraordinary task that we have asked him to lead, and he does so with confidence, with calm, with incredible competence, and he was absolutely the right person for the job, and we're grateful for everything he's doing. They're not fun conversations, and it's not fun work at all. But you're being steadfast in it, Joe, and we really appreciate everything you're doing. I do want to acknowledge, as we were talking about that scalpeled approach, I think what's very important for people to understand is when we use the county number to begin the process, most county schools did similar things. We had similar learning models. What we're seeing now with the scalpeled approach is that people will be making different decisions, even if the county number is the same, because of their local data. There are schools in our county, there are districts in our county that have very few cases, and there's not community spread, and they're able to keep their students in school. The other thing that I would like to comment on following the audit and the information that was shared with us is, again, we heard, and board members and community members, you've heard this multiple times, but we again heard that we educate students for about $2,000 less than the average metro area. So that means that some districts are able to do things differently because they have more funds and can pay for additional staff. So there are districts around us that are bringing kindergartners or kindergarten and first and second grade in 4 days a week. It's because they had funds and were able to hire additional staff to serve, so we could split kindergartners up into 2 rooms, and they had a paraprofessional and a teacher share those kids. So there's a story in this that I just think is very important, again, for board members in the community to understand, and that's why it's very difficult to compare districts and how districts are making decisions around this, because the local context is very important to understand. As Joe just shared, our local context right now is very devastating. The numbers and I was working with Joe this morning, and every time he turned around, I was trying to get what's the number from last Friday over the weekend to today, what's the number at the high school? And every time he looked at his computer or his phone, there was another case. And it was at that point that I said, we cannot wait for the original timeline, and for the safety of our students and our staff, we have to make a move now. And that's the decision that was made today. So as we look at that decision and we look at that transition, I want to remind folks that, that there can still be some in-person instruction during distance learning. Oh, whoops, I'm on the wrong slide. I'm sorry about that.
One more.
Sorry about that. Some of our next steps. So now I think I'm back, Joe. I think you've got to go back one. Thank you very much. So with that significant number of new cases, as Joe said, we are transitioning to distance learning beginning November 12th. At this time, the elementary students will remain in hybrid, but we know that if those county numbers and if our case numbers continue to rise, that's something that we're going to have to look at. Our plan right now is to review the Scott County data at our meeting on Thursday, and then to bring all of that data along with our district data to our incident command team meeting on Thursday. And if needed, we will communicate to families at that point. So again, as I was saying before, there is some opportunities for in-person instruction during distance learning as laid out by the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan. We are able to have students with disabilities, English language learners, students that are experiencing homelessness or in foster care, or students who are struggling academically and socially. And our plan moving forward is we will be bringing some students in to school in person. Those plans aren't 100% fleshed out, and what we do in the first couple of weeks might look different than if we're in distance learning longer. But to start with, we know that our Bridges students will continue to have some in-time or in-person time. I think you can go to the next slide, Joe, thanks. It will be a reduced amount of in-person time, but as we heard, amazing things happening there that we want to be sure to continue. Our early childhood programming will also, at this point, continue to operate in the in-person hybrid model that they have. There are some different regulations around early learning, so at this point, we're hoping to be able to maintain that programming. And then additionally, you'll see that as we look to our students who require center-based special education services, we're continue to work on a plan to see what that looks like. And then, as I said, moving forward, there'll be other students that we'll see how we can continue to serve them as well. So the timeline that we shared earlier with our community is tomorrow will be our last day of hybrid for right now. Very disappointing to all of us. I know Jim and his crew worked really hard on the sewer issue that we had at Twin Oaks, yet we were unable to have school today. So I know for our middle school hybrid A students, that's a loss that we feel horrible about. We just felt we needed to make this shift sooner rather than later. So Wednesday will be a flex day. We'll finish the first quarter in distance learning for all secondary students, grades 6 through 12. And then, so that gets us to Friday, and then next Monday and Tuesday, the state does allow us some days to help and ensure that our teachers have the time that they need to get set for this transition. So we'll do that on the 16th and 17th. There won't be school for secondary students on those 2 days then. And then the 18th was a planned grading day for K-12 students, so the teachers will continue to work. And then on the 19th, quarter 2 will begin, and distance learning will resume for grades 6 through 12. And again, just at this point, again, elementary, we are in hybrid, but we certainly want parents to pay attention and to plan forward as needed. One thing that we do know is when we are required to go into distance learning, we need to be in distance learning for at least 2 weeks. So what we'll do is we'll continue to monitor and communicate as we know more, but families can plan on that right now. With that, we have been listening to stakeholders and preparing for an improved distance learning experience from the emergency remote teaching that we were all called to do last spring. And I think as you heard tonight, there have been unbelievable advances to that. So with that, I'll hand it back to Dr. Schuttinger.
Thank you. You'll see the term Distance Learning 2.0, and that really is a fundamental shift in what we were doing last spring. We've learned an incredible amount from surveys, from our work every day with students, from a superintendent student advisory council that Dr. Stallo conducted. And some of the things we've learned is that students want more synchronous learning with teachers. So they want more in-time synchronous opportunities to learn directly from their teachers. Students want also more synchronous interaction with their peers. And you've already heard that starting to come to life, especially in DLA and hybrid. We need more consistency between courses, and that in terms of the use of Schoology, the use of Seesaw. You heard several teachers mention that already. That's something we spent a lot of time and effort on in August. And expectations. You'll hear some of our secondary teachers mention the weekly learning guide. That's something every single secondary teacher releases either at the very end of the week for the next week or the very beginning of the week on Monday morning, so that students know what the expectations are in terms of assessments, assignments, due dates, learning outcomes for the week are. We also want to have more consistency with synchronous and asynchronous expectations so that students, parents, teachers are all on the same page. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Bezic and John Dahl, our high school and middle school, high school principal and middle school assistant principal, to share some of their work that they've done as a secondary administrative team to build some of these common and consistent expectations and structures for hybrid and distance learning. Distance learning.
Well, hello. I believe I was here about a month ago at the last meeting talking about, even before we were looking at DL, we were already looking at, for our hybrid for second quarter, adding some more synchronous pieces. So when we knew we were looking at the possibility of going distance learning, actually the middle schools and the high school together, we came up with a very similar structure, just to, for the help of families and all that. So we are gonna have the requirement of daily sessions with kids and at least 30 minutes of synchronous instruction. That could look a variety of ways. It could be, starting the class off and then breaking into group work or doing things. It's not just sitting there and lecturing at students or having a stare down, but it's going to be some, breaking out and doing different things. So we think that'll be, that'll help. We've seen what the surveys and what parents were saying. The one thing that they would like is a little bit more of that. So we think we can do that. We've presented that to our building leadership team and to our staffs. Both of us did last week, and got good feedback from that. And actually, I think the one thing going to distance is going to give the teachers a little bit of a focus on just concentrating on the distance instead of having the hybrid and the distance kids. So, if there's one silver lining, it might be that there's a little bit of focus and to be able to flesh out that distance learning piece this next month. So that is probably the one good thing in all the, nobody wants to see the kids leaving, but we think that, again, will help in that area. And the learning guides, we'd already been planning on, we had weekly learning guides, but we're just, we actually chose 2 templates, so everybody's using the same 2 templates to put information out there on a weekly basis so that it looks the same, so there's that consistency and all that. So we've had that, but we wanted to tweak it a little bit and all that. So I don't know if John wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've really benefited from was what we learned from last spring and having ongoing conversations with our teachers and our built teams. And then what we have also been already implementing this fall and taking kind of those best pieces and what we learned and gaining the feedback. And, Dr. Salo mentioned today at Twin Oaks, we had a bit of an issue. And if anything, the silver lining of that is that we were able to very quickly get the message out to our families, our students, through Schoology, listservs, let our teachers know, and we nailed it. We had a new schedule at the middle school, our distance learning schedule, where we were able to actually start the day a little bit later for our students, and at the same time increase instructional time by eliminating that passing period in between, because our students obviously don't need to go from class to class. So, and what's amazing about that is that one of my teachers, I'd already set up an observation to do today, and they were like, no, let's do it. I want to try something out. I want you to see it. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And I jumped in, and students were engaged. The teacher was ready. It was great. I got to be honest with you. Such a quick turnaround. Nailed it. So really pleased with what happened today.
Thank you. So secondary, obviously, these plans are coming to be needed very soon, sooner than we'd like, of course. Elementary, we've also put a lot of time and effort into planning for if we are forced to make that transition in elementary as well. One of the things that we have going for us in elementary is we have so much to learn from DLA. We've already had that school, and we've learned from their 2 months more of experience in providing distance learning for elementary. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Molitor, our principal at Glendale Elementary, to tell a little bit more about that process.
Good evening, everyone. I just, as I was working tonight before I came here, I came across this quote that I just need to say after listening to those amazing teachers tonight. It says, engineers make bridges, artists make paintings, scientists make rockets, but teachers make them all. And what a humbling experience to listen to the teachers tonight talk about what they're doing in a time of a health pandemic. They are just an amazing group of leaders and educators, and I'm so proud to be a part of that. So thank you, and thank you to all of our staff and teachers for what you're doing. We have been together as an elementary group, working along with the teaching and learning group, peer coaches, deans, and elementary principals, working together to put together our elementary transition into distance learning. As part of that, we also have reached out to our BILT members, which is our Building Instructional Leadership Team, to gain insights and input from them as to what our plan will be. We are gaining input, like Dr. Schuttinger talked about, from our DLA teachers who have been doing it on what is working and what we could do differently. We learned a lot from the spring. We're learning a lot this fall. And we have also learned that our flex days are going so well for us and allowing us to provide small groups and individualized instruction for our students. So we are starting to look at what does a daily schedule look like? What are teacher expectations? Continuing on with our Wednesday schedules, our attendance procedures, and in Minnesota, our inclement weather days, and coming together as a team with input and guidance from all of our stakeholders to make sure that we have a solid plan in place to help meet the needs of our staff, our students, and our families. So thank you for your time this evening.
Well, we will transition after hearing, again, I think some amazing planning and hours of work and learning that's been done in order to ensure that our students have a wonderful learning experience at the secondary level as we transition, and should we have to, at the elementary level. At this point, we're going to take a little bit of look at the activities in athletics, and Russ, if you'll forward that slide, please. As you all know, in the original Minnesota Safe Learning Plan and through the Minnesota State High School League, what we heard was distance learning equals distance coaching. However, for all of you who have been following the story over the last 2 weeks, you know that that really is not the case. And at this point, it is possible that schools could be in a distance learning format, but still be able to offer other activities. The options, I think, for the board to consider this evening, and certainly that we've talked about for several hours, is we could suspend all co-curricular activities in athletics while students are in distance learning, including youth sport and outdoor outside user facility use. Or co-curricular activities in athletics could continue. We could continue to monitor the data as we have been on a weekly basis. Russ, just in the last couple of weeks, started bringing his own report to the incident command team as well, so that we were really looking at the data from athletics and activities as well. So we could continue to do that. We have a plan currently in place where we would begin allowing practice for in-house community users on November 16th. We had told the community groups that we were not going to during first quarter. We needed to get our heads around and our staff around the work, but we had promised them that we would take a look at that as second quarter started, so we have a plan in place should we be able to continue to do that. We'll hear more, but I want to start this part of the presentation just letting you know that, that our administrative recommendation is for co-curricular activities in athletics to continue, to monitor that data. I know it'll be on a daily basis with Russ and his staff, but by the incident command response team on a weekly basis, and that we would also recommend that we begin allowing those in-house practices and community use for facilities as planned. And with that, I will hand it over to Russ to talk a little bit more about this. Russ and I were on a Zoom meeting earlier today with the South Suburban Conference superintendents and activities directors. You know that I am meeting constantly with Metro-wide and area superintendents, and I know Russ is doing those same things. So this becomes a collective presentation with a whole lot of other districts that are grappling with the same things.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. The slide in front of you is really some guidance or at least some rationale for why we should continue to provide co-curricular activities. Most of what's in here was in the letters that Chair Shimmick shared as the meeting began this evening. I want to point out two that I think is really important to the work that we do here. One is the choice that our families make to have our students participate in these activities. Some may choose not to enroll, and others think that they would like to try. And that was clear with the letters today. The other one that I want to point out is I do believe that the protocols we have in place are the safest way possible to provide an experience. And What we found when we didn't provide spring activities and what was happening this summer was they were finding it elsewhere. And they were doing so in programs outside of our community that maybe weren't following some of the safe protocols and then bringing back some of those positive COVID tests to our community and to our programs. It really is the equitable solution. I do worry about families that don't have the means to find a club or a AAU team that they can compete on. And so it would be helpful for that purpose to allow a scaled approach. Really, this is a common sense approach to how we could continue to offer our activities and our programming. The incident command team would meet weekly, discuss our local data, not just our zip code data, but the data that I bring that goes into what each program is experiencing at any given time. And so we've gotten through most of our fall sports. We got through the entire tennis season, boys and girls cross country, boys and girls soccer, and girls swimming without positive cases. We've had 2 athlete positive cases in volleyball, and really they have 2 weeks left of their season. We've had some coaches. We had 3 volleyball coaches test positive. We've had 3 football coaches test positive. But because we're following protocols, keeping kids in pods, coaches in masks, players in masks until they're on the court or on the field, we've had success in providing programming. So this scaled approach would allow us to turn some things on and off. We could turn off spectators, as an example. We could have more of our group 1 sports, those individual sports like gymnastics, dance, cheer, alpine, Nordic. Those sports could practice and compete, some virtually without ever seeing another opponent. While team sports may just be in practice mode, waiting for test results or waiting for positive tests to go down so that they can, again, compete against an opponent. So it really is a common sense approach, and it does take into consideration the differences between wrestling and basketball or alpine and Nordic and ice hockey. So we know that there are some sports that have greater risk for transmission, both within the team and during competition. Through contact tracing, we've been able to determine that the majority of all the positive tests I've dealt with through athletics have been transmitted through a social event and not necessarily through a competition or even at practice. Again, I do believe very strongly that when they're with us and with our coaches, they're following safe protocols. It's really the decisions that families and athletes are making when they're away from our programs. We also have a bit of a dial or scaled approach to performing arts and activities. I've met quite a bit with our Knowledge Bowl, our mock trial, our speech coaches, and our theater program, and they believe very much that most of what they do is going to continue to be virtual and be safe for our kids to continue participating in. We moved our spring play to the fall, so the musical's this spring, but we do have a taped performance that will be released November 20th and 21st. That's coming up, but then theater will move into a 1-act situation. I've met with band and choir to come up with ways that we can continue to provide small group or private lessons to keep those kids engaged. But again, knowing that the majority of what they're going to do is virtual as well. So this is just another way of looking at how the incident command team might handle activities in fine arts. And it would really, we could go back to how we handle sports as well. These 2 things are going to be very much in alignment with each other. In the fine arts and activities, we kind of combined levels 2, 3, and 4. These 2 models are consistent with what all the South Suburban schools are doing and how they're hoping to handle cases and activities as we move forward. Most of our schools in the conference are moving to distance learning or have a plan to do so in the near future. And most are going to attempt to try to provide co-curricular activities really until they can't. There's a scenario where we're in a 0 or a 1. The governor could have an executive order that shuts things down. We could decide locally that it's just no longer safe to provide programming. But it would give the incident command team the authority to make those decisions based on our weekly local data. I think the other piece that's really important to tie into this is our ability to provide community facility use. I've met several times with MDH, and each time they are very clear that we should be tying our decision to allow youth sport programming and community use with our decision to continue co-curricular activities. And so if the decision is at some point that we shut down the 6 through 12 programming that we offer between our middle school and high school, it's likely that the recommendation then would be to shut down youth and community use as well. As of now, we do have plans in place, like Dr. Stallo said, to begin allowing community use on November 16th. A reminder that the decision was made that use would be in-house. It would be our kids in our district boundaries, and we'd allow practice in-house, but that at this time we were not going to allow outside our community use. So in essence, we're not allowing traveling teams to come in and play our teams in our facilities. And that's in place till at least Q3. In Q3, we were going to re-examine, see where we're at, and at that time possibly allow some outside user groups, outside our community that is, to come in and play our teams. We do know that PLAY basketball is very interested in getting into our facilities, as is the Prior Lake Wrestling Club and our Storm Swim Club. And there's other users too that would like to use it to a lesser extent.
So as we end this piece, thanks Russ so much. Again, this is a little interesting because you did approve a resolution to provide me the opportunity to make decisions through the Minnesota Learning Plan. However, because we thought that the Minnesota Learning Plan meant distance learning equals distance coaching, it gets a little confusing, and I felt it was important that I bring this recommendation to the board for action in terms of how we would move forward with activities and athletics. I would also recommend that moving forward, especially given how quickly decisions and communication had to be made today, I would recommend that, just like with the learning model change, that the resolution that you passed also provides me the opportunity to make decisions on activities and athletics moving forward with the incident command team. So with that, will certainly on any of this be happy to answer questions, but specifically to the action that we're requesting this evening.
So to be clear, the action you're requesting is that we give approval to you to go forward with the model that you presented without necessarily having any board input, except to follow what you've outlined. If there's a significant change, that would come back to the board, just like it does in the Ready to Learn plan.
Correct. And I think Chair Schimick, so much of this, it would always be my hope that, I'm updating the board as often as I can, and especially if there are decisions that can wait until we get to a board meeting. Again, I think today was a great example of how grateful I am that you did approve that resolution so that I could get that communication out to families as quickly as possible without having to seek board approval on that.
Okay. I'll open it up to questions. Stacy?
I just had a couple questions. So, as far as the sports with the dial, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So, we could have, okay, here we go, scaled approach. We could have different sports in different numbers, basically.
Well, that's a good question. So most districts, and when ADs get together, we categorize our sports, our winter sports, into two groups. Group one would be the individual sports: gymnastics, dance, cheer, alpine, and Nordic ski. And the group two sports would be your team sports: boys and girls hockey, boys and girls basketball, and wrestling. And so those are the incident command team would sit down and really look at what our data is for each program. And sometimes what our data is at each level, right? We have 5 levels of boys basketball, 4 levels of girls basketball. So where are the positive tests? How did the pods work out? Were we able to quarantine just the one positive test, or do we have to quarantine multiple players within a program? So yes, I do believe that the scaled approach, when we look at it, we will consider the risk from each sport. We'll consider the data that we have for each sport. I do think that there's room within the dial to turn certain things on and off, but I don't think that we would split the Group 1 sports and look at them differently. I think you'd consider the individual sports that don't necessarily have to compete against opponent, and then you'd also consider the sports that do have to compete against opponent. And then with that, is there a difference between basketball and wrestling? Maybe. Is there a difference between hockey and wrestling? Probably. And so I do think that it's a common sense approach, and this is the guide that we can use to make a common sense decision based on what's happening with our numbers.
So, and I know we've had, you know, like have you said, we've had issues this fall where we've had to, like, just a certain team, right? I mean, like just whatever, 10A or, so we've been able to do that and kind of, you know, mitigate where and how it's spreading and be able to control it that way. And so I'm confident in what we've done with the athletes. I guess where my concern comes, I think more is the spectator. And because I think, you know, I think you already said this before, MDH has said that they have more concern around the bigger event. It's the super spreader or having these things where we're bringing larger groups together. So I just wonder in some of these facilities, if we're in a basketball facility and you allow 2 people, you know, we're still have to stay within that 250 number, right? I mean, as far as.
Right. The guidance right now is 2 spectators per participant. But again, there's local autonomy. The incident command team could certainly suggest that we are going to continue playing, but we're not going to continue having spectators. And to your point, MDH has made it very clear that their concern is the athletes playing the sport, but their greater concern is the events that take place around the sport, the meals that take place, the social gatherings that take place before and after an event, and then obviously the social gathering that takes place inside our buildings during the event. And so there is, you know, there will be discussions about whether or not we can continue to add spectators. There's a guidance that's out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to provide 2. We could go down to 1, we could go down to 0. We just can't exceed more than 25% of our total capacity.
Any other questions?
Hi,
Mary? Mary?
So, Russ, can you help clarify, you talk about spectators, because it sounds like we're not gonna start competition 3. So can you just clarify your definition of spectators?
Sure. Well, we have guidance right now that suggests 2 spectators per participant is allowable at indoor events, but not to exceed 25% of your total capacity. So for instance, I can only fit 51 spectators in my pool, spectator seating area. And so we will have more than, we can't possibly allow 2 per spectator in that particular sport. And we certainly wouldn't be allowed any away spectators at our boys swim and dive. And so we have to carefully examine each facility, look at how many participants are in that sport. You know, we've done a good job with volleyball. We have 5 levels of volleyball, and we have time in between games where we can disinfect. We move people in, we move people back out. And so we'll continue to do those things.
So it says, I could, when you practice use only, no competitions allowed in Q3, did that only apply to the play and the community, or did that apply also to the sports? I think that's where I'm confused.
So you're talking about this slide here with the PLAY use. So we're allowing practices and in-house competitions, and in those in-house competitions, we would allow 2 spectators per participant for our youth programming as well. So as of right now, starting November 16th, we're going to allow practices to begin. If a Prior Lake team is playing another Prior Lake team, say it's 3rd grade basketball, we would right now allow for 2 spectators per participant to come view that sport as well. Until we learn that, or the incident command team suggests that it's just no longer safe to do so.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was conflating the competitions with the entire sports program, not just the in-house, you know, baseball, basketball, floor hockey, stuff like that. You're saying that this is the Prior Lake Athletics for Youth programs and the community facility use. I'm just trying to understand where the,
Yeah, you're right. It should say in-house games or practice use only. No,
Okay.
it's no outside competitions, no traveling competitions.
okay, thank you for that clarification. And then to kind of build on what Stephanie said, or Stacy said, I'm sorry, I'm a little tired right now. We could essentially have one sport that has a threshold, exceed a threshold number of students and or coaches that have tested positive or need to quarantine, and therefore that only that sport is taken offline for a while, whereas the other ones could continue.
That's correct.
Okay. Does the Minnesota High School League have any say in our threshold or what we do, or is that completely local control?
As of right now, that will be local control. The high school league has voted to sanction our winter sports, and unless we see governor action or action through MDE or MDH, I don't believe the high school league will step in at this point.
I'd also like to add, Mary, I know this wasn't part of your question, but I also wanted to add that at the regional support team meeting last week, they were clear that they would not be, when I asked them about the recommendation for our learning model change, they were very clear that they would not be giving a recommendation around activities in athletics.
Okay. And then my other question, Russ, you indicated that from what we know now, and I'm not quite sure if this extends into the actual contact tracing being performed by Joe, but what we have now is that so far there is an evidence of transmittal due to the sport itself or due to the gathering, due to the players in the sport.
Right, so the questions we ask, and I do this with Joe Kabushek whenever we have a positive case that involves an athlete, we ask specific questions about mask use, time inside of 6 feet. We ask about transportation, how they got to and from. We ask about what they're doing on the bench. We ask about what they do when they're in the game. And so once we gather that information, then we decide who would need to quarantine, as part of that team. In most cases, because our athletes are doing such a nice job of following protocols, we haven't had to quarantine large groups. Our largest quarantine group was 12 football athletes that were all inside the same huddle during a practice that was moved indoors because of weather. And we had one positive case, and the other 11 kids in that huddle also had to quarantine. But for the most part, it's been isolated to just the athlete who's tested positive.
Okay. And because the athletes know that if they test positive or if they're forced to quarantine because of a social event, are we working on attempts to have that translate into more or less positive peer pressure on the players to not engage in, let's say, social gatherings and parties, et cetera, on the weekends?
I'm glad you brought that up. Our coaches talk with our athletes every single day about making good choices when they're not around us and remind them ways they can keep themselves safe by staying home, sanitizing hands, wearing masks when they do go out, limiting interactions. So we have those conversations on a daily basis. I am putting a plea out to our community. We've got an increase in cases right now, and a lot of it surrounds what happened on Halloween and what our families and athletes chose to do when they were away from our programs on Saturday night. And so if we do hope to play, if we do hope to get through our winter season, it's going to be because our families and our athletes choose to stay home, choose to limit interactions, and choose to stay safe. And so we are putting a little bit of the onus and the responsibility back on our families. Our COVID team, incident command team, can only do so much. We have to use the data that we're provided, and the data that we receive is going to be based on the decisions our kids and families make when they're away from our programs.
Okay. And then I had one final question, and that was with the distance learning, with secondary, I would assume that makes, even for short term, and hopefully this won't last for long, that makes it easier to use the facilities. And I don't know, Terry, if you can answer that, but that's my assumption. I don't know if you can clarify that.
Actually, I can, and Jim Delwell is also here. He and I had a conversation earlier today that, you know, just as we're all trying to make sure our staff stay healthy, right now, he believes that, you know, he would be able to ensure that staff changed hours and were able to help cover those practices and events. And again, that
We're using the gyms for classrooms too, correct, right now?
One of them.
And-
Yeah, yep.
Okay,
Oh, and physical education for sure, yes.
okay.
We are looking at, once we move into distance learning, we'll look at trying to free up at least one of those courts by moving some of the furniture that's currently in there. We may see a reallocation of staff, our operational staff, down to the elementaries to continue to provide services there to keep the students that are in hybrid safe. And so we'll continue to work with Jim and Maureen on staffing and what it might look like and what we can possibly continue to provide in terms of community use in our facilities, as well as our winter practices.
Does anyone else have any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Okay, then I will take a motion to approve the model for the athletics and activities that's been outlined by Russ this evening.
So made.
By Stacy, second
Second.
by Jonathan. Any other comments or questions? All right, it's roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
I'm not sure if Melissa's there.
Aye.
Thank you, Mary.
I don't know either.
That motion carries 5-0.
Can you hear me?
No, Melissa, I can't even tell if you're there because I haven't seen your face most of the presentation.
I just turned it off for a second.
It's been off
that-
the whole Ready Learning to Plan presentation. Your face has been not there, so I didn't know if you're even still with us.
Yeah, Mary and I turned it off during the presentation. She didn't have hers on either. That's a nay for me. Thank you.
That motion carries 5-1. We'll move on to World's Best Workforce.
Good evening, Dr. Stallo and directors. How are you? When I get this pulled up, we'll just, oh, there it is. Do I need to do anything else? No. Nope, perfect. Okay, this is the time of year where the World's Best Workforce Report is to be presented. Of course, there's some major differences this year. One of them is that we just don't have the data that we normally would to present, and this is a document that we turn into Minnesota Department of Education, and this year they've communicated to us that they're looking for an abbreviated report. So I will just take you through some of what will be in there. Again, the World's Best Workforce Report, just a quick reminder, is 5 different data points, and they build on each other. So we first look at if students are kindergarten ready, and that kindergarten readiness gets kids in the right position to be reading on grade level by 3rd grade. We also look at different gaps in achievement between different groups of students, building on successes for students to be college and career ready and to graduate. And the data that we do have is going to be around students being kindergarten ready and then graduation. And we normally are looking at MCA data for the other 3. And so I do have some trend data from past years just to remind you of approximately where we are. So our first piece of data is all students being ready for school. And so these were students who were in preschool last year who just entered kindergarten in the fall. So we were looking at, are they ready for kindergarten based on a literacy composite score? So that's a test that all students in kindergarten are taking. And we're looking at like letter sounds, letter names, like do they have the things that they need to become successful readers, to the basis to learn to read. And we had some really good results. So 66% of our students were in a low risk category. And that means they're at low risk of not being at grade level by the end of the school year. I know it's a double negative, but we want the students in our low-risk group. That's where we want them to be. And then 34% of our students were in a some-risk or high-risk group. And you may off the top think, oh, 66, that's not so great. But I do want to say that the some risk category are the students that are like right on the cusp. They actually have a 50-50 chance of being at grade level by the end of the school year. And with the instruction that our kindergarten teachers provide, especially this year, I know there are many, many challenges, but we are implementing a new phonics program. We have not had that in the past. And we're really looking for this number to change throughout the school year and definitely by the end of the school year. So I would expect that to be higher by the end of this school year. And remember, the next three, we just don't have updated information for, so I wanted to let people know what had happened in the past. This is data looking at all third graders and their reading level against Minnesota, and you can see there's some variation, but overall Prior Lake students are somewhere in the mid-60s as far as reading on grade level. Achievement gaps have also been very stable over time, widening slightly or closing slightly as the year or subject might be. I would have actually expected that to be relatively similar data this past year that we don't have. And then I included some information about different types of gaps that we have. We're looking at more than just race, ethnicity gaps, also among students receiving free reduced price lunch, receiving special education services, or English language learner services as well. Then looking at students being ready for career and college, there are a myriad of different ways that we support students to be ready for career and college. A lot of those are offered right in our school with AP classes at the high school, opportunities for post-secondary enrollment options at Normandale, taking the ACT, for example, or the ASVAB, the test to enter into the military. We also have bridges opportunities for students who might need that, and it can help them get on a path for being college and career ready as well. The first data point is ACT scores. If you'll remember, the ACT also was canceled last spring. We were able to make that happen for our this year's seniors in the fall. That was earlier in October, and we don't have those scores yet, so I can't report on where those are, but when I get that, that will be something I will report on. One thing we do have to look at, though, is the percentage of students who were in the graduating class of 2020 and had also taken advanced courses during their time at high school, and that was 43%. So that is something we want to continue to build on. The graduation rate is always reported a year behind. So the graduation rate that I'm reporting tonight is the most up-to-date one. We don't have the one from last spring because students have until into the fall to finish all of those credits, and they don't get reported out until the spring or late winter. So these are district-wide four-year graduation rates over the last number of years. So slight uptick over the last year, but overall somewhere between 92 and 94% of students graduating in 4 years has been happening in Prior Lake. And since we talk about gaps as one of the things in the world's best workforce that we're working to close, those are on display here, and they're similar to the gaps that we see on the ACT in terms of achievement overall, as well as in math or reading subtests, and similar to what we see on the MCA. All right, then if we look just at Prior Lake High School, this is the four-year graduation rate over the past 6 years there, so some slight declines. Oops, sorry. And then to put it into a little more context, I wanted to show that from last year compared to high schools that are similar and or in the area. So you can see where Prior Lake High School is as far as that four-year graduation rate. So very, very comparable. All right, so then because we are missing some of that data, those highlights and areas for growth, just there were unfortunately many limitations, and we can't draw many conclusions from that, other than we can see some disproportionality, even if it's not showing up in MCA scores from the last year. We did see that in the graduation rate. We are going to be looking at some different measures for student achievement this year because we didn't have the MCA last year, and we don't know what's coming our way for the spring. And so you might remember that we adopted FastBridge Learning as a universal screener, and we use that in grades kindergarten through 8, and so that is a resource we can look to. That is given in the fall, winter, and spring, so we're able to see how students are acquiring skills throughout the year. And then another aspect that we can look at is always the student experience. Along with that FastBridge universal screener, there is also a social emotional screener there, and that gives us some insight into the student experience, as well as the stakeholder surveys. And at the high school, some other surveys that are also looking at the student experience. We have BAR, which is Building Assets, Reducing Risks, and that is specifically targeted at 9th grade this year and will build into 10th grade. And it's a program that is happening in the advisory periods that is around strengthening the student experience, and some of that survey work will happen as part of that program. So we'll have that data to look into as well. The World's Best Workforce, those 5 goals are part of what fuels our school continuous improvement plans. Those are the goals that we're looking for in that desired future. This year, we are still having school improvement plans like any other year. It is still a school year. Although we did not have MCA scores this past spring, and we don't know what's coming in the future, we still have our goals for students learning and for student proficiency rates. Again, we are looking to close gaps, and one way to show that is by comparing different student groups. That might mean that we're looking for more growth from some groups in certain years to be able to get to that overall goal. And the process also stays the same. So school improvement goals are established, and it is based on root cause analysis done by principals, looking at and leadership, building leadership teams, looking at specific issues, identifying causes and reasons behind these things, building a rationale, and then doing some action planning. And I know principals with all the things on their plates have still been active in figuring out what types of ways that they will be progress monitoring those goals throughout this year especially, so that we have information about the progress that we're making on those. This slide is just to remind us of the alignment between these goals. So we have the World's Best Workforce goals, kind of the larger district goals that we're all working toward. We have those individual building goals, and then within the buildings there are different teams of teachers working together on goals, and teachers also have individual goals. But those goals aren't just whatever they think they would like to do. They're all really aligned and building toward the district's strategic directions and those World's Best Workforce goals. All right, what are your questions?
My understanding is this is a report only. And
That's right.
It's just a matter of the board accepting your report. Okay,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
that is correct.
Does anyone have any questions for Kristlyn on the report?
I was just gonna say one thing.
Stacy?
I know the FastBridge is due this year, or recently. And I've been hearing good feedback, at least. I mean, when Dr. Stahl and I went in, that they were pretty excited about that. I mean, have you had good feedback from how it's working and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, like with anything, it's new, and then like add the pandemic to it. So one thing that's actually been, positive is that we are able to administer it to students, both those who are learning at home and those who are in person at school in our hybrid model currently. So regardless of the learning modality that we're in, we will be able to assess students, and teachers will be able to see those results and they'll be able to use those results for grouping students, for figuring out what a whole class might need and even what individual students might need. Yep. So I've been in every school, either virtually or in real time, also working with teacher leaders and principals so that everyone's got what they need to be able to use that data effectively at their school level.
Because it's totally launched. I mean, I know we were trying we were doing FOSBED and a couple different kinds.
Yeah, we
and then
piloted,
tested-
that's right, last
Right,
spring.
and then I was talking to a teacher that had piloted a different one, but was learning, and was doing fast.
Oh, you're talking phonics. Actually, you're talking the kindergarten teacher at Westwood with the
Oh,
phonics
yes, I
curriculum.
thought that, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
which is
right.
another huge asset to our
Because I know
curriculum.
the phonics piece too was one
Yep.
that we really felt we needed to kind of step up
Yes,
again.
that's correct. Yeah, and like it's my, I really think we're going to be able to see the effects of that phonics curriculum. I think that's going to show up already in the winter results of the FastBridge because it goes into some really specific skills and looks at them. Teachers are able to see those results, not just in the phonics program that they're doing, but they're going to see that in the results that they get in FastBridge as well.
So we'll be able to see something this.
Yes, that's
winter
right. Yep, that's right.
react
And
to
so
it,
like
so
in
we're not
February,
taking-
after the window closes.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too.
Jonathan?
So your foundation of the presentation was talking about how these things build on each other.
Yes.
The first building block, of course, is kindergarten readiness.
Yes.
Which is getting kids ready for us before we technically have them.
That's right.
How do we identify and work to improve that specific piece of it? It's so important.
Yeah, that's really true. And part of that is, like parents may or may not choose to have students in any type of structured learning environment before they come to kindergarten or not. But it does mean that all of our programming with our nature-based preschools and preschool, anything through Edgewood, is really an important part. And I have worked with the preschool around finding out what their assessments are, that are age appropriate. They don't use FastBridge. They're looking at some different skills, but all the things that get kids ready to acquire the skills that come next.
Thank you.
I think the only other thing that I would add to that, Jonathan, is I think there's always opportunities for partnerships with other early learning centers in the community. And, I think that probably is an area that we could continue to work and grow. And again, in true partnership, not like we have the answers at all, but just ensuring that, we're all sharing resources and also supporting families, I think through family education, early learning, family education as well, just to make sure that they have the supports to help students so that they will be successful and school ready.
So much research has been done, right?
right.
Art Rolnick at the Fed and just all the stuff about the importance of having them ready when they get there. So I was just curious.
Any other questions? Mary?
I'd like to build on that and then ask an additional question. And I remember when you presented to the curriculum committee, we not only had the kindergarten assessment, but you had also cross-referenced that against the percentage of those same kids who had been in an early learning or a preschool program. Did you do the same thing in the summer of 2020 for these numbers?
Sorry, Mary, your question cut out just a little bit. So you're asking if I divided the group into students who had attended our preschool and compare that to the group of students who did not attend our preschool?
Yes, because I remember you.
Yeah, I did, that's correct. Yep, and there was really no difference. They came up even.
Okay. Thing that I think was already asked during the study session earlier, but I'd like to just make sure I understood it, is that since we're going to bridge, and we may or may not, again, is there anything to really show the cohort, cross-reference between those? Did you say you had, because this will be the first time we're going to be getting FastBridge scores this year when they are tested, how do we see a progression, or if the previous MCA scores, et cetera, relate to FastBridge, and to see if there's an improvement?
So you're asking how FastBridge correlates to MCA scores?
Right.
I mean, we won't have that cohort information yet because this will be the first year that we've done that, but we will be able to see, you know, pretty immediately how the scores correlate. I mean, FastBridge already does, you know, large linking studies with tens of thousands of students nationwide, and the correlation coefficient's really high. It's 8 or above, depending on the specific tool. So it is really highly correlated to the MCA.
Okay, so if we wanted to see an improvement, let's say in the reading, especially with the impact of the phonics program, then we would see that come through in the FastBridge.
Yeah, in fact, the FastBridge tests are more sensitive to these specific skills than MCA is, because the MCA is looking at standards and concepts, and FastBridge is telling about the skills that you need to be able to access that content.
Okay. So do Spanish for Lalo de Lago, or is that a different test?
That's right. FastBridge also has parts of it in Spanish.
Okay.
Are there any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Okay, do I have a motion to accept the report on the world's best workforce?
So moved.
By Michael, second by Stacy. Any other last comments?
Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Aye. Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Again, Melissa, are you there?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Chrislyn.
Thank you.
Second.
Dr. Schuttinger.
Good evening. We have the district response to the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. We had some time at the last study session to discuss this in depth. I'm happy to answer any questions you have again tonight, and then we are requesting board approval.
Okay, I will first take a motion to approve the district response to the vote of noncompliance. Do I have a motion?
So made.
By Mary, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Are there any further comments or questions? As Kevin said, we did discuss this at the work session, so.
Can you just remind me what the process is now when you go back with this memo in response? Is there a back and forth at that point, whether they accept that memo back or?
So we actually have a meeting coming up on Thursday. I meet with the leaders of the PAC every month. So we have a meeting coming Thursday morning, and I'll discuss this, and we'll use it to have some back and forth. I can certainly update the board at a future meeting. There's not a formal back and forth with the letter, but.
No, I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you. This
Thanks,
one is
Kevin.
actually me too.
Okay. You don't want to come back again yet tonight? We'll move into policy. We have one policy that was presented to us in October. This is the 521 Student Disability Non-Discrimination Policy. This would be our first reading, official reading. I'm not sure that there's been any changes since it was first presented. Is that something that you were going to reference? Okay.
I do have some notes from Deb Anderson, who wasn't able to be here tonight.
Sorry.
No problem. She mentioned that our district attorney, Amy Mace, recommends that we change student disability non-discrimination policy and replace current policy 521 and the grievance procedures attached to that policy. The current policy 521 includes different grievance procedures, and we recommend including the grievance procedures in the policy so that a reader does not have to locate and review different documents. If we prefer, however, we could create a separate grievance document with the grievance procedure set forth in the policy to retain the type of system that we currently have. So we could continue to use that separate grievance form, or we could combine them into a single policy. Amy Mace also recommends that the board approve them to replace the current procedural safeguards used by the district. And some of those differences are that the current safeguards include a 20-day timeline for having its Section 504 hearing, which would be difficult, if not impossible, to meet in most cases. And the current safeguards state that a parent may be able to recover attorney's fees if the parent prevails. And unlike IDEA, there is no provision in Section 504 that states this, so you will not find language in our sample in the recommended policy. And then headers have been added for ease of reading and locating the relevant provisions. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the changes that Deb has suggested.
From when it was first presented?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Procedures are usually, on our policy, what our past practice has been, the procedures are added at the end. They're not included in policy, therefore they can be changed and adapted as need to, rather than going back and reviewing the policy again. And I would suggest that we would continue that practice. If it's legal, it sounds like it is,
Sure.
from what you said. Does anyone have any other questions based on what Kevin just told us? This will come back 2 more times. Mary?
Well, does that mean that the policy then that we're talking about ends at the word school board adoption?
Yes.
Okay, so that includes the procedural safeguards, the right to alternative complaint procedures, and the school action and the investigation of complaint, right? So that would include everything and not just the legal language of the notice of procedural safeguards at the bottom.
Where it starts, notice of procedural safeguards and parent and student rights, section 504, that's more procedural, that would be in the procedure part, not in the policy. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it's just that a lot of as the procedures, like that smaller font is the actual legal regurgitation of the act, which makes sense because then that would apply anyways.
That's right. Does anyone have any other comments? As I said, this will come back again next time, next work session.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have no second reading of policies. We have board approval of policies. Policy 204, school board member violation of policy. This policy has been reviewed at length. This is the at least fourth time that it's come before the board. We've had a subcommittee review the policy, come up with a revised policy. And I would like to make a motion that we approve this policy. Do we have a second, or do I have a second?
Second.
But Michael, any further comments or questions?
Yes, I did.
Mary?
Policy back. Yes, Mary, we were supposed to take the policy back and look at the sections that were taken out, which was, page before it says school board, adoption, and, I suggest drafts of complaints, 1, 3, 4, and then to make sure that we have, the frivolous resolution, language in the top, since that will also eliminate a large portion of the policy from going any further into the statements at the top.
At the end of the policy where it says school board adoption, that's the end of the policy. What you're referring to would be procedural. And I don't.
That was under discussion from last time. I didn't agree with that.
Okay, I will open that up to the rest. I will open that up to the rest of the board then, Mary, to discuss, because that was not my understanding. So I'd ask for feedback from the rest of the board on that part of the policy or procedures.
You're talking the other considerations for policy, that listed part, is that what you're talking about?
I think we're talking about where it starts complaints. Do we need that included in the policy? Michael, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, so it's the two different pieces that we're talking about, bringing some from that additional piece up to the one that's being voted on right now? Mary, are you talking about this 12C2 on the agenda, other considerations for policy?
I'm not sure if that's where it's on the agenda, the actual policy up there, and the language after potential remedies, those are essentially procedures, by the way, but the language that as basically extracurricular language here, that we had listed from our meeting, but it was not my choice to not include them at the top, but they are fairly detailed. So we there, and in the study session, the last work session, a homework assignment was assigned for people to review and see what, if anything, from the last page, which is not procedural, should go up into the top part of the general statement of policy. And so what I was suggesting is that the definition of complaints, which is just out of the whole section, only paragraphs 1, 3, and 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 1, 3, 4, and 7, and then we also talked about, and we did talk about this quite a bit in our committee meeting, about a frivolous or a non-frivolous complaint, simply because this was going to be going out to everyone. It's going to be listed, and so this would actually help the public also understand what a valid or non-valid complaint or the definition would be, such that if it's not a violation of policy related to conduct just because you don't like the way somebody that type of just general description out there. I do not think we should put the investigation pieces out there, and what we talked about last time is even if we did, that would require probably legal advice, and that we didn't want to pay an attorney to review this, so the entire investigation section probably shouldn't even go in there.
So just to clarify, you're still talking about looking at the two different documents. I don't know if I'm following. Are you only referring to everything in policy 204 as brought forward, or are you talking about the additional considerations pulling some of that? I'm just having
The additional considerations. I'm talking about the additional considerations that we pulled out in general language just because it was up for discussion.
Okay, then
The original policy presented, so technically this is really our second reading, but
No, this policy has come before the board. This is at least the fourth time.
Actual end pieces of it that were in, remember the original draft was quite lengthy after before the committee took it back, and so we reworded it, added some stuff at the top, and then left some things in peripheral. And then last time during the actual work session, it was, we asked people to look at that last page. In our board book, it's actually right after the policy is listed.
That's right, Mary, and I did receive some feedback that they wanted the policy to end at where it says school board adoption. I did receive some feedback since the last work session. So my motion is to approve the policy ending at school board adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a second.
Okay, and there's no discussion if anyone wants to include anything else in it?
I've asked if anyone has any more to discuss, and I'm not hearing anything from here except for clarification from Michael. And does anyone else have any other comments?
We did discuss it at study session, and I had gone through that document prior to that meeting and had underlined, and it seemed that it was more that was complaints against school board members from the outside in, as opposed to our self-governance policies and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable, and that's where I thought we had left it at the end of the study session.
Any other comments?
And I guess I would echo that part as well. I did review the additional information, the additional options to add in. I do think this is, again, as Michael stated, more self-governance. So for me, I'm comfortable with the policy as it has been reworked and with the motion for the new 204 as written.
And I was under the impression that a question that was asked last time indicated that this was not just self-governance. And I remember, I think that question, Stacy, you replied,
Yeah,
this could be something coming from the outside too.
it could be, yes.
Are there any other comments? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary? Mary?
Nay, sorry, nay.
Melissa, are you there?
Nay.
That motion carries 4-2. Thank you. We'll move on then to policy 603, curriculum development. And I'm not sure who's presenting that. And school district, Kevin again? School district
He's a busy
system
guy.
accountability. You got them both, I guess, Kevin.
603 and 616 are both unchanged since the last draft in September 22nd, I believe, was last presented to the board. Since then, we have added 2 students to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee, 2 Prior Lake High School students who will provide their perspective in the group as well. So we've pretty dramatically increased the number of parents and students on in the group.
Awesome. Good to hear.
I'll make
Okay.
a motion.
Can we make a motion for both?
Yep.
Is we comfortable with
603
that?
and 616?
Yep.
I'll make
Motion
that
made by Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second?
By Michael. Any other comments or questions? All
Could you
right.
just clarify, are we voting on 603?
We're voting on 603 and 616 together. Did you have a question?
No, they just seemed like 2 different ones.
Well, they
But
are
I
2
don't
different
care.
policies. They complement each other, or we can vote on them separately if you prefer. The general
No,
feeling
I'm
I got
fine.
here is together. Okay, I have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Michael?
Aye.
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to administrative reports. Dr. Stalo, do you have
I
anything
do have
else
just
to
a couple
add?
things, yes.
Okay.
First of all, I want to congratulate our newly elected school board members, Mary Franz, Amy Crosby, and Julie Bernick. School board members Lee Schimmick and Melissa Anger did not seek re-election for another term, but certainly want to thank you for all of your years of service. Also, in terms of kindergarten enrollment, it doesn't seem possible, but the season for the 21-22 school year is getting underway. Obviously, this year, we're going to be doing some things differently for safety reasons. We will be offering an online kindergarten information session on December 3rd at 6 p.m. We'll live stream the information session, and we will be providing parents with a Google form in advance so they can submit questions. Parents will learn about our traditional kindergarten program and our Loyola del Lago Spanish immersion program. And then our online enrollment begins January 14th for kindergarten students who are entering school next fall. This will be the class of 2034. And also just wanted to quickly highlight, MinCaps had a taste of education that I was able to pop into and see virtually some of the work that they are doing, researching a profession. And just really, again, I think another great example of how they were able to do some of the same work that they've always done, but do it virtually. And then I guess just the last thing that I'd like to add really quickly is, you know, I know the decisions that we're making around our learning models this year and making the best possible education decisions that we can during a global pandemic. I know they're difficult. They're actually impossible decisions for us to be making at kind of an impossible time that we're living in. And I know that there are varying perspectives and degrees of emotion around these decisions. So I just want to state that. And I know that there is absolutely nothing that we will be able to do this year that will please everyone. I hope that our community, as you listen to our teachers especially tonight, continue to trust the quality of the experience that students are receiving, and always encourage our families and our students to have conversations with teachers if there's something that's not working for them, because you heard the responsiveness this evening, and that's always the best place to ask questions or get additional support. So just I want to thank our staff, and I want to thank our families and kids for everything that they're doing during this really trying time. Thank you.
I'm guessing there's no administrative reports. Jim's saying no. Abby, I'm going to start with you so I for sure don't forget.
Well, yeah, I guess I'll just kind of review what our, me and Dr. Stolo met with our Superintendent Student Advisory Council on, I don't even remember when it was.
28th?
The 28th, so was last week, or a week and a half ago. And it was really exciting because I know Dr. Stolo has been hoping for this group and hoping to form this group for a really long time. And it's finally coming into existence, and it's a good time, honestly, because I think student feedback is really important right now. And I definitely, as a student, I don't want that to ever be overlooked when making decisions. And so when we were meeting, we kind of just talked about preliminary thoughts about hybrid learning and distance learning. And it was kind of exciting to see everyone's feedback and where people agreed on things and where people disagreed. And, you know, it was interesting. Dr. Bizik brought up a lot of the things because Dr. Stolo was already able to share the feedback that she got from our group with the administrative teams of, you know, all the schools, and especially the high school and Dr. Bizik. And so it's exciting for me to see that the feedback that the students who we selected gave Dr. Stolo has already, you know, been in effect, and Dr. Bizik is pushing that out to teachers. And I think that's just a great thing to be able to continue doing, especially moving to distance learning. It's weird. It's really weird, and nobody knows the right answer, and I think it's just really important to be getting the student feedback, and I think we have a really solid group of students to give us some feedback. So yeah, that's kind of all. But Jonathan, before the meeting, brought up a question to me just about kind of the general mood of the student body right now after hearing, you know, the decision to go to all distance. And my initial response was just sad. I mean, I think a lot of students are feeling pretty disappointed with just how this year has gone, because it's not what anybody wants or hopes for, especially the seniors. Like a girl in my 6-hour class, my teacher was asking everyone how they were doing, and she's a very happy, excited person, and she just looked like she just got hit by a bus. Like, she was sad. And I think it's just, I don't think anyone is mad about, any of the students are mad about the decision. I think it is, we're at a place of, we understand that this has to be done, but I think there is a lot of disappointment in it, and I think that the more that we can just rally around and, you know, support each other in whatever ways possible, the better, because it's not a fun situation. Yeah, so that's kind of that.
Thanks for that, Abby. You
Appreciate
said
your
it better than we probably could have. We're all feeling that way.
Yeah.
Are there any other board reports? Michael?
I have a couple quick, just to update, the Community Engagement and Legislative is continuing to meet and work with stakeholders on the resolution we hope to bring forward to the study session. I was also given a brief update from Community Ed for September, October. They just wanted to share that Community Ed courses have been following all CDC, MDH, and MDE guidelines, and the staff have been sanitizing the rooms before and after classes. Youth classes being run right now, 53 classes, 6 are virtual with 455 participants, and adult classes are 43 classes, 10 virtual with 283 participants. And then for the Early Learning Advisory Committee, we had our first meeting virtually last week as well. And I would say both the teachers and parents on board really had a celebratory spirit about having some days back in person with those littlest learners. And they are really looking at creative ways to engage both if need be at a distance, but also using that eSTEM focus. And so I was invited in to observe later in the week. And I saw a class combine special ed students with regular attendees, and they were working together, and they're doing an excellent job of getting them out, using the environment and playing, but they're teaching as they play, and they're actually assessing during what the kids consider playtime to do their assessments to see what they're learning and how they're measuring things. It was just fascinating to see personalized learning at such an early level. So I wanted to pass that on. And I think I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Stacy?
Just quick, I had EMSD, Dr. Stella and I had that virtually on Friday. Started talking legislative platform. I had to go a little bit early. I know she had more detail about that, but that's coming forward. Obviously, all the districts are crying for money. Will be what it will be. I think I'm working my way. I'm hopefully going to get into my last 2 buildings before we have to go distance. So found my way into all the buildings this fall, which has been nice to kind of see it. Was able to experience some of that great teaching with Allison Short. Like I was there when she had COVID and was teaching and was able to see some of the stuff. So just what the staff has been doing has just been really incredible. So I want to commend them for that.
Mike, Jonathan?
I also had a chance to visit with Dr. Stallo to Five Hawks and Loyola Del Lago last week. Really glad to be able to get in because who knows how many, when we're going to be able to visit buildings with kids in them again. So, hopefully soon. But it was to see Loyola Del Lago when I was last there toward the end of the construction, right? To see those spaces and full of life and full of kids was heartwarming and just great to see the change to the building and the brightness. It's such a different space in a good way. And also, so great visits with Richie there and with Katie at Five Hawks. And I'll just say, I think I got a really good cross-section of a few conversations with teachers. One that was kindergarten teacher at Loyola Del Lago, enthusiastic, excited about what was possible this year instead of looking at what we didn't have. Another teacher, as positive as she could be, but also certainly expressing that it's not easy and it's harder. And a third conversation that was more about, please make sure my high school kids can keep doing their sports. And so just the different perspectives from our teachers, 2 of them expressing kind of a different view on the year, one of them expressing views more as a parent in the district. And so I do appreciate all of those perspectives.
Mary, did you have anything to report? No? Melissa?
Yes, with Southwest Metro, they are experiencing some staff shortages with substitute teachers and that sort of thing. And on that note, they are using the Monday and Tuesday of the Thanksgiving week to take a look at a transition to distance learning. And then we had the audit report from this last week as well. Other than that, nothing else to report.
Okay. All right, I think everyone has said how we're all feeling, and it's not easy going through this, and there is no really right decision we know of. Appreciate everything that everyone is doing, and the decisions are not easy, probably the hardest ones we've ever made. So we'll just keep moving forward and hope things get better. We all need to do it together, though.
Lee, before we adjourn, if, I thought I'd share a comment that a neighbor made to me as I told him I was headed over to a board meeting, and he just said, remember, the virus is the one driving these decisions, not you as a board. And I do think that's important perspective.
Okay, we'll move on to future events. Veterans Day is November 11th, 2020. The end of the first quarter is November 13th, 2020. We are canvassing the election results on November 13th. I don't remember the time for that. Is that at 8 o'clock?
8 a.m.
Okay, 8 o'clock. No school on November 18th, K-12. Our next board study session is November 23rd at 6 p.m. And Thanksgiving break, there'll be no school, E-12, November 25th to the 27th. And at this point, we are going to go into closed session. So we will take just a couple-minute break if anybody needs it. We'll be back here at, nope. We'll be back here at 10.